I call this meeting to order. This is a Redmond City Council study session held on Tuesday, April 9th, 2024, commencing at 7 p.m. Council members in attendance are Councilmember Fields, Councilmember Anderson, Councilmember Stewart, and myself, Council President Kritzer. And online we have Council members Salahuddin, Councilmember Nueva Camina, and Council Vice President Forsyth. There are 5 items on the agenda tonight. The proposed revisions to the Salary Commission Redmond Municipal Code, proposed changes to Council Rules of Procedure and the Redmond City Council Meetings and Public Participation Guide, Police Technology Update, Redmond 2050 Planning Commission recommendations for overlay green buildings, our Redmond zoning code rewrite, human services and annexation and regional planning, and council talk time. The first item on the agenda is the proposed revisions to Salary Commission Redmond Municipal Code sections 2.38 and 4.47. Melissa Files, Chief Operating Officer, will introduce this item.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. With me here tonight is our City Attorney, Daniel Kinney. He's here to answer any kind of legal questions that you may have. If you will recall, in February, I came to the Council to discuss potentially changing the Salary Commission Redmond Municipal Code to allow for the Salary Commission to be created outside of a mayoral election year, which is what it states now. At that time, Council asked that I ask some questions and then asked that I bring back options as to changes in the code. Attached in your packet was a matrix of both questions and potential code changes that you could pick to change the code to allow the Salary Commission to be created. So tonight, if you would like, I'd like to go through those matrix changes. First, we'll look at the questions and then go through the matrix changes and to see if there is any one of those options that you would entertain approving so that we could create a Salary Commission this year or next year, depending on the option that you choose. So let me just share my screen. Just find it here. I had it just a second ago. That is the wrong one, so okay.
And while she's pulling that up, I will just note that I think what would make sense in terms of doing some of the decisions on these is, and I had written this to the council in advance, is that a couple of these are options that we need to choose in either or, and I think those are the first 3 that are basically decisions on timing. And then the others are more ones that we could adopt as additional changes, so we can take those ones one at a time. And my thought was that we can have some discussion and then we can do thumbs to get a sense of which ones we want to move forward with.
For some reason it's not showing up, so let me just unshare this and try this again. Hopefully that is it. There we go. All right. At the February conversation that we had, there were 3 questions. I won't go through the questions unless you have questions on the responses. So I'll kind of open it up to see if anybody has questions for those 3 that are on the screen.
Are there any questions or comments on these answers to councilmember questions? Otherwise, we can move on. I'm not seeing any, so let's go ahead.
All right, so the next thing would be changes to the code. So the first one is providing flexibility in the timing of mayor and council salary review. So there was several options. One was to create a salary commission every so often, but at least every 4 years, which is essentially what it is now. Then it would be to convene at least every 4 years, and then at the same time, the mayor's salary would be reviewed. And then the commission would meet again at least every 4 years. So it's kind of 3 changes to the code. This was the original option that I brought to you. This allows us to create a salary commission every year if we choose, but at least every 4 years. So that's option 1. The other option was to establish a salary commission every budget year. So that would establish a salary commission every 2 years when we do the budget. So it'd be commensurate with the budget process. So that was option number 2. And the third one was to have a salary commission meet every year. And essentially, that commission would be in place for the term of each commission member. That would allow us for them to meet every year and perhaps increase council and mayor salaries by CPI, but it would essentially keep the commission in place. So the commission would be established, and then they would be in place for the term of those commission members. So they wouldn't go away, because essentially the statute says once the salary commission is put in place, then once they finish their job, they go away, and we recruit a new salary commission. So this one would allow a standing salary commission. So those are kind of the 3 options that we had talked about in the last conversation we had about this. So I'll stop there in case there's any questions about those.
Yes, and I see there's a question, or go ahead on that, and then I'll give an idea on how we proceed on deciding on this.
Sure. I just wanted to ask on the second option to move it to every odd year. It was stated that that was to line up with the budget. In my mind, this is currently a budget year because it's 2024 and it's the end of the biennium. So in my mind, this is an even year. I know this is a really basic question, but I'm not understanding why the text says odd year. You're right. If we are going to look at it before the budget, it would be even year. So we could put even year in here. The budget just starts on an odd year, always. So it's 21, 22, 23, 24. I think at least for the extent that I was promoting such an option, I think my intent was just move the whole conversation prior when we're working on the budget. It's also not an election year, and that feels a little better to me personally. So just to clarify that, I think that would have been a bit more my personal intent. I don't know if others intended for the odd year, but thank you.
I do believe that this option was based on your suggestion, and I actually just didn't catch, because I knew the intent, and I didn't catch that it is an even year. So I would propose that as we consider option 2, we think of it where it says odd, saying even, if everyone's okay with that, for just the purpose of decision making, unless others disagree with that. Because I think the idea was to have the commission decide on what the salaries would be, and then we budget for it in the budget.
And we can change it to even year. That is enough.
Okay, great. Thanks for that question. Are there other questions on the options before we discuss, which one we might move forward with? Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you, and thank you for picking up that technicality, Ms. Stewart. I appreciate it. My general question for all 3 of these options is, what is the staff time commitment to support a salary commission every budget year? Or, well, I guess under each of these options, are we really seeing a difference in the startup effort from a staff perspective to support a commission once every 4 years versus more regularly to support a 4-year term of these individuals who might be appointed? Can you give us kind of a sense of what that would look like?
Sure. It's definitely going to be more staff time than originally, because every 4 years it's pretty minimal staff time. If we do it every even year, then it just doubles the time. So usually commissions, they have about 10 or 12 meetings in the evening. They usually last a couple hours. And then there's the time for recruitment and research that the Human Resources Department does.
Okay, and my other, I guess I appreciate that perspective. I heard minimal time and also the recruitment costs kind of as a separate portion of that, which would happen every 4 years or every 2 years or however the cycle works for finding an individual to fill that spot. So annually, we would expect a minimal amount if we went with the annual option. And then every 2 years, we would also expect double what we have now for the meeting time. And then the 4-year option would be kind of the minimum meeting time that we need for the commission every 4 years. Is that correct?
That would be correct. If you had a standing commission, you wouldn't go through the recruitment every time, so you would cut out that time.
Yeah, and I'm more concerned about what's the administrative burden that we're working with here. So the next question I have on this would be, if we were talking about CPI, I think that the note I had made to myself when we were talking about, I think it's the number 3 option, it sounds a little bit like the salary commission might be limited to considering only a CPI adjustment, whereas I would like to see something like a total compensation review every 2 years, but a CPI adjustment on the off year. Or some sort of legislation that could support that, doing that automatically. So I don't know how we would look at these 3. I know we were just talking about timing in this one, but my preferred would be annually to support a commission to do the job regularly in line with the hiring plan and staffing that we typically look at as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you, Council President. My question is, with option number 2, if we were to have it convene on even years so that we're prepared going into the biennial budget, then would we still be able to stagger the salary commission appointments as pointed out in option 3, so that even though there's, every 2 years they're meeting, that there's some overlap for historical knowledge?
I believe that we could do that. It would essentially make option 2 a standing committee, kind of like option 3. So we would just bring them back every other year rather than every year.
Thank you.
Great. So potentially you would have staggered 4-year terms and people would get to serve basically in two different decision makings in that scenario?
That would be correct.
Great. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Thank you. I am intrigued by that new potential option that is on the table. My main question just has to do with the striking of the on the same schedule and replacing it with at the same time line. Can I get some insight as to why that language shift? The new salary commission will be convened every, let's say, even year at the same time instead of on the same schedule.
I believe that is, it has the same effect as the same scheduler at the same time. I believe they're the same thing. Am I right in that, Daniel? I'm just checking with Daniel, so.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to get some clarification from Mr. Kenny. But as to why that shift, because it to me reads basically the same, but I'm trying to see if there's something I'm missing here.
Yeah, I actually don't recall how that first originated, and I'm just referring back to the code for 238010 for the mayor's salary review. And so I think we would just make them consistent with each other as a result of that. I don't remember how that got in there, but it seems just more straightforward to me.
Okay, just a language clarity issue from what I'm understanding then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my only concern, is I just want to make sure that we're bringing these together as at the same time like we had proposed to do in the last review cycle. I'm just for weighing in on opinion, I am intrigued by, let's call it option 2A, which would be every even year plus the ability to have folks stay on for a second cycle.
Thank you. And actually, I think what would be great, unless there are other questions on this, is to go around and just get a sense of where council members are and to see if there's a majority interest in one of the options. And then would propose that we could dive a little deeper on fine tuning that option. So it sounds like we have a 2A as well in consideration. And we heard opinions from Councilmember Anderson and Council Vice President Forsyth, as well as potential opinion. I don't know. It was more of a question from Councilmember Nueva Camina. So we'll go around. Councilmember Fields, would you like to share your thoughts on which option is most compelling to you?
I have to ask a question before I can answer that question. Is it possible, it feels like we did this at one time, and maybe I just don't remember, but to establish a council salary and then also have a CPI index for the term of that, what if it's 4 years or 2 years? Can we do that?
Are you referring to not using a salary commission and doing it?
No. I'm saying the salary commission establishes a salary for, I'm going to use 4 years. And then within that first year's salary, there is a CPI index for the following 3 years.
I've not seen that done before. It has to go for referendum. So it has to be open for referendum, has to get filed with the clerk, and then it has to be incorporated into the budget.
I don't think that's quite I think what he's asking is if a salary commission made the decision about a 4-year salary, and then in their decision, they could also do a CPIW per year.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that would be up to the salary commission, so there couldn't be any mandate that would have to happen, if that makes sense.
No. I'm saying that the salary commission can do that.
They could choose to do that.
Right.
Yes.
And we could provide guidance. We could include, we can't provide any guidance.
It's an independent salary commission. So
We can't, so they don't know their options when they start this work?
they create their options.
Okay.
I guess, yes, that could be part of the suggestion, but that doesn't mean they have to follow that. So that's, of all, for example, in the last salary commission, that was one of the options we shared with them.
Right, that's all I mean. I'm not saying that we tell them what to do, that we let them know what they can do.
Correct.
And I remember the last salary commission, those were questions that they had. So anyway, so I think the answer is probably.
It's a possibility, but it
Okay.
can't be mandated.
Yeah.
Councilmember Fields, I see Councilmember Anderson has her hand raised, I think, in response.
Yes, so this is a question for Mr. Kinney. So if the Salary Commission were to index by CPI and have one action for a 4-year period increasing, would it be subject to referendum each year there was an increase?
No, as I read it, it's their recommendation is subject to the referendum, and then it gets incorporated into the budget.
For a 4-year future look
Yeah, I
ahead,
mean-
even though we do budgeting on a 2-year cycle?
Yeah, so I'd have to look at that, but because the statute refers to incorporation into the budget, doing it for longer than 2 years or the budget cycle, I think could be problematic.
Thanks.
Well, let me just explain why I'm asking that question and why I was leaning in that direction. So there's two categories of things that go on. One is cost of living, CPI. The other is changing dynamics of the city and the work itself. As the city grows, the work changes, and I don't think that happens in 1 year or 2 year. That happens over, at a minimum, a 4-year period. So the complexity of the job, in my mind, bringing a salary commission in every year, the only thing they're really going to look at is, hey, what's the inflation rate? And rather than bring a bunch of people in and have them spend their time asking, hey, what's the inflation rate? We could actually tie it to that. So that's where I'm going. I don't think that doing this work every year or even every 2 years is necessary. I'm leaning towards 4, as long as there's a CPI suggestion or whatever we call it.
Great. So it sounds like you're generally for option 1, with the potential that the commission could be given guidance that they're able to add CPI increases. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Just seeking clarity on the last conversation. There was the question about being open to referendum if the salary commission recommendation spans more than 2 budget cycles, which is how it currently stands. So does that potentially lead the current 4-year cycle, even though we budget on 2-year cycles, leave us open to some potential gray area?
No, I don't think so, because there's only a single recommendation being made
Okay.
every 4 years. So no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Salahuddin, do you have thoughts on which option is most compelling to you?
Yeah, I was, in hearing the conversation, I appreciated what Councilmember Nueva Camina did bring up with that option 2A potential. I don't know if she raised it as a question or as a comment, but I think, having it every 2 years, I don't know if we need it every single year, but to Councilmember Fields' point, I think, spacing that out, we should have all of those, cost of living metrics, all of the information. So I think right in the middle, option 2A, if that's a possibility, is where I would lean.
Great. Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to voice my support for option 2A that's coming together. One of the pieces of compelling data for me on that option is there is work involved in recruiting a commission and staffing up a commission. There's also work in filling vacancies because commission terms are too long and life intervenes. So at 6:30 this evening, we had a special meeting to interview a new library commissioner. That is a replacement for someone who moved outside of the city. So that happens all the time on these commissions. So there are going to be more opportunities throughout the way to increase the staggeredness and all of that without having to restaff every single time. So I think that's a really happy medium. I think I would like to support that option.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. I'm in general in support of this, but I think we're talking about one of the things we're kind of glossing over is what we mean by salary review. And I want to encourage us to think of number one, a salary study, and then number 2, a salary review, which would be more of like an annual process. And the salary study is like a market study for the compensation and benefits to make sure that it's on par, which is more like what we have right now. And my question for Ms. Files on this is, how often do we do that process for staff? I think it's about every 4 years for staff salaries too, right?
It depends on what group you're in. So they do them practically every year. So they go union by union or non-rep, but just do it in the groups.
You mean the study or the review?
The study.
Okay, we have a market study done every year.
About every year, every other year, just to make sure that all the groups kind of stay.
Yeah, about every other year is I think where we're kind of landing here. So,
Yeah.
and I want to encourage council to think of yourself as an employee of the city. So we should be subject to the same terms, and those processes do also apply to us in a certain way with the support of a volunteer commission. So it would help with structuring how our body is organized, as well as the mayor's salary too. So I think that's just my general suggestion, is thinking about it in terms of things that processes and resources we have already at the city to facilitate this, and then keeping us on that same par. So thank you.
Thank you. And on that, I would comment that when we did last year review the mayor's salary, we looked at comparables for others. So I guess one question is, typically, does the salary commission get information on comparable salaries for other cities surrounding us, which I think in a way is the salary study?
They do. They get all the comparables on cities our size and what cities are doing around us. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So it does sound like this option 2A that has emerged, which would replace odd with even, and would also establish staggered 4-year terms for salary commissioners, would be, just 2-year terms? I'm hearing from one council member. My understanding was that it'd be a 4-year term so that you could serve twice on the commission, and that you would only have half of the commissioners each time. You would eventually build staggered terms, but if anyone else has other suggestions, that was just my interpretation. So happy to open it up if others disagree on that. Councilmember Stewart?
Sorry to interrupt. No, I guess you got it right. Thanks. Thank you.
Other comments? I see a thumb. Good. Okay. Seems like we are coming in around this one. So if we are on that, are there any other comments based on what's showing up in number 2? Obviously, we've incorporated a couple of suggested revisions, and we can get these back to us before we would actually take a vote, but taking these ideas into account. Mayor Bernie.
I just wanted to share that Director Laird's online if we did have questions for our HR director. Oh, you're right there. Oh, I'm sorry. She's right behind me. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. But she is available if you all do have questions of her.
Perfect.
Just want to make sure.
Well, it sounds like we have a good amount of direction that we can provide to be able to bring us forward on this item. I'll suggest we move to the next item, and then at the end, we'll give a chance if people have other thoughts that come back to you. We can do that as well. So the next item, I don't know if you want to do an intro, is the idea of changing the salary commission from 5 to 7 members. Hopefully we can scroll down on that. Would you like to speak to that, COO Files, or otherwise I'll just ask if anyone on the council wants to speak to this before we take a temperature?
Sure, I can just give an introduction. When we had talked about this, we had talked about expanding to a 7-member commission. A while ago, and I meant to look at the date, we had taken it down to 5 members for the ease of recruiting members into the salary commission, but asked that if we could change it to 7 members. If we do change it to 7 members, we need to change Redmond Municipal Code 4.47 to change the quorum requirements. So it's 2 changes to the code if we make this change.
Thank you. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Thank you. This was actually a request of mine for this conversation. This was something that we just changed last year when we made the amendments to this section of the code, and I should have spoken up then about it, and now I'm grateful to get this chance to speak up about it. I didn't quite, aside from the argument of it's hard to recruit people and retain people, I didn't quite understand the rationale for dropping it from 5 to 7. We had 7 members sign up and get sworn in last go around. We did have one who never showed up, but that still didn't impact quorum in the last cycle. And I think we get a better, broader voice of community when we have 7 members in this commission. So I'm fully in support of this one.
Councilmember Anderson.
What is the smallest commission we have in the city? Is it 3? LTAC? No.
Civil Service Commission has 3
Got
members.
it. Thank you. So quorum is 2, right?
Are there other comments or questions on this? Otherwise, we might do a thumbs up, thumbs down to get a sense of whether council members are interested in making this change. Councilmember Fields.
Well, can we answer the question that Councilmember Forsyth just asked? Why was that the only argument of going from 7 to 5?
I believe that was the major argument. Catherine, do you have any more information on that? Okay. I believe that was the major argument.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of 7.
All right, seeing no other questions on this, I'll ask council members who are online to use your emojis or turn on your screen if you're interested. I think I just saw three thumbs. And council members in chambers, can you thumbs up, thumbs down, uncertain? Okay, I saw a majority with thumbs up for including this in what we'll vote on. So we'll move on to the next item. Would you like to speak to this COO files?
Sure. This was something that I am recommending that we clarify the role of the salary commission. So essentially, per the statute, the salary commission can make decisions on salary. However, they cannot impose any other duties or obligations or hours that a council member would work or expectation on council positions since you are an elected body. So this was just to add to the code some clarification for the salary commission members.
Councilmember Anderson?
Do we have room to have them consider total compensation? Or is it just salary?
I believe it's just salary.
It's just salary.
Can you explain how we get benefits?
Well, that's just separate and distinct from this conversation. The Salary Commission has a limited role under statute to look at the salary.
Understood. I want to understand who gets to decide what benefits council gets.
Director Laird, would you like to come sit at the table?
Since she's the benefits expert.
Right.
Which, for clarity, council can currently access healthcare benefits, but has to pay into that. So I guess the question is whether benefits would be covered.
The question is who gets to decide that? It's not council because we can't decide for ourselves. So if we can assign it to an independent salary commission, that makes sense as part of a total compensation package to me.
Great. Director Laird?
And we may not know the answer of how we get them.
I actually can't answer exactly how we got to this point where council has salaries. I'm sorry, how they got the benefits. I do know that it is in our summary plan document that allows council to have benefits. So at some point, the decision was made, and how the benefits were designated was identified through that, which council had to approve. But it was not, as far as I know, it was not by a salary commission that made that decision.
Okay, and we also, I just want to point out, we are also deciding benefits for the mayor's salary and compensation. I just want to make this process fair for everyone, and I would ask if we can make this total compensation instead of just salaries.
I guess my question would be, and perhaps this is for Mr. Kenny, whether council is able legally to decide on our own benefits. And if not, then is that a different commission, I guess, is what Councilmember Anderson is asking, or can the salary commission include benefits as part of their salary decision, essentially?
So a few different questions in there. So starting at the beginning, yes, I mean, I think council could decide benefits. Council could decide salary as well, just has chosen not to. So there is a world in which that could happen. I don't read the RCW establishing salary commissions to include anything other than salary. I don't know the answer to the original question on how that got going and the authorities there, so I'd have to look at that as well. So I just don't have an answer to that, and then we can see how that could be provided, whether there's a way to say a salary of a certain type that can be used for or something, for a benefit. I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look back.
My understanding would be it's in the scope, we get to define the scope of the commission, correct?
Well, no, the statute defines the scope of the commission.
Are we limited? We're the lawmakers, so we can tell them what to do.
Well, no. The state has defined the limits of how a salary commission can function. But again, you don't have to use the salary commission. So you could go around about this. You could create a salary advisory committee, and you could set the salaries using an advisory committee. But if you use a salary commission as it's currently structured, it would be making the decisions for you.
Can I ask that question in a separate way? So you are saying that the interpretation of the state law is that we are limited in a establishment of a commission that they can only talk about salary-based salary.
That's what I'm going to look into more. The RCW only speaks to salary. It does not speak to anything else. And I'd have to reference other statutes, but other statutes would speak to things like benefits specifically. And so I think my guess is if they wanted to include more than just salary, they would have said that.
Okay, I'm not a fan of limits. So I just wanted to find where it is. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Councilmember Anderson, and I do think that we should get clarity on this before we make this decision of exactly how benefits could get set and whether it would be in the scope of this decision or whether we might put it on the docket for a different decision. Councilmember Fields.
I would like to get clarity on what we're getting clarity on.
I believe we're getting clarity on one, perhaps if we can look back in history to see how benefits were established for the council, see if we can find it.
But if I could just interject.
Sure.
The original question from Councilmember Anderson is who gets to decide? So I don't care how we did it. I care what the rules, who has that authority.
Right, and that's what we're going to get clarity on. And perhaps history will tell us that.
Okay.
And two, is there other statutes that would specify how the council benefits are done? So we're getting kind of clarity on benefits.
Yeah, and very appreciated. And I do think that it's an important part of the conversation, and as part of this work, we should make sure that we're all clear on how that happens. Councilmember Anderson, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, so you mentioned a salary advisory committee. If we establish the salary advisory committee, could we assign them the responsibilities of a salary commission according to RCW?
No. So this, sorry, so there's two statutes, right?
Can we use the same people for the two separate jobs under the same topic?
Well, so no. So if you establish a salary commission, they've got roles and responsibilities. They would follow through, give a recommendation that goes in, incorporates into your budget. There's the separate statute, and I don't have it open in front of me. I can get it pretty quickly, that if you don't go that path, council has the authority to establish their own salaries, and there's some limitations on that. And so I could pull that up and we could reference that. But you pick a path and then you're on it. If you pick the council establishes council salaries path, you could, ask for studies to be done. You could ask for advisory committees to give you recommendations, and then just like you do on all sorts of decisions.
But we could also establish a salary advisory committee as part of this, and as part of the scope of that committee, we could have the commission be at a commission as well. It would serve also as a commission. I don't see a difference between us getting a volunteer group of people to discuss salaries and also benefits and not have them have the authority to do that. If this is more confusing than it needs to be, I think you answered two separate questions one of them that I didn't ask. So I just wanted to make sure that we can add the scope if we wanted to call it an advisory committee to the council.
Yeah, I would say from what I'm hearing is that establishing a salary commission creates one process. The council getting to decide is a different process, and we could get advice, but we would make the decision. So it's really who makes the decision. It's the difference between the two different paths, and really the difference in the committee versus commission. Mayor Bernie?
And I think that's exactly right. And the other piece is that if the council makes the decision, then the salaries go into effect in a staggered fashion. And I can't recall what the statute is in the state that says that. But so then the next people elected would get the new salary, and the people in office wouldn't get the new salary till they're reelected again. And so I think that's historically why the city decided to do it this way long ago, and I think we talked about this a few years ago as well. If you want to continue with this, and that was the decision then, of course, you can make a different decision, but it's either A or B. There's not the clean model where it makes more sense. So, I mean, it makes sense, but it is either one path or the other, as Daniel's been
I'd be super confident if people are able to review and advise on what the council should get paid, that they could also choose what our benefits are. And I just want to make sure it's the same group and we're utilizing those resources that we go to recruit.
And I do think benefits, I will be interested to see how benefits come about, because I suspect there was a decision by the council to add council to the benefits. And so that's a different path separate from salary.
It sounds like our salary advisory committee is our staff. Okay.
Let me see what order the hands are up.
Sorry, folks, I'm
Councilmember
super
Nueva
wonky on
Camino.
this.
Love this conversation. Of course, when we talk about pay and who gets what and how it's decided, it's always very interesting. I also think that it's very interesting, and I'm glad that Councilmember Anderson brought up the point around who decides the benefits, because as we go through our careers, whenever we're talking about compensation, it's always a total compensation package and not just salary. And salary, that they both can be used as levers depending on various budgets and resources and that. So I would be in favor that whether it's advisory or commission, that those benefits are taken into consideration, and also getting clearer on again, as COO Files mentioned, the history of it and where we go from here.
Thank you so much. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to add a little bit of context. I know Kirkland just had their salary commission, and I believe they wrapped in their health benefits as a coverage option, and they added a child care benefit during meetings. So very interested to hear what we hear back from Mr. Kenny about compensation packages and how that all could work and how that plays into it. I'm not interested in going down the path of removing the salary commission and changing to a committee for the reasons that Mayor Bernie stated, that the compensation doesn't kick in until people are elected or re-elected. We did talk about this a bit last year with everything going on, and I'm still in favor of the independent commission.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I agree with Council Vice President Forsyth in that the conversation around benefits is a question about what council can do to help contribute to reducing barriers to serving on the council, and I appreciate that conversation. Also, I just wanted to voice my support for the initial proposal from COO Files, option number 5 here. I'm in support of adding that change. Thank you.
Okay, so wrapping, did you have a comment, Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, I can't read the change, but we were talking about that the salary commission can't change the scope. Those words were added about can't change scope, can't change the hours. And there was a lot of angst over that when this recent salary commission was selected and then unselected. I don't know that, I actually don't, from my understanding, I'm not sure that that came up as a problem, but what is a problem is an understanding of the scope and understanding. I remember public testimony from former council members coming in and saying, hey, you're only working 10% of the time or something. Like, okay, maybe you did, but that might not be the case today. So I'm not trying to define the hours, but there has to be some information for a salary commission to understand the work that they're trying to do. They may not be able to change it, but there should be discussion and an understanding of it. So I want to make sure the words that you've added, COO Files, doesn't limit them from getting insight and an understanding?
It shouldn't limit them from getting understanding. What it does limit them is that the salary commission puts in something in the salaries that says a council has to spend so many hours as a council member, because the statutes do not say that. And so it's essentially saying they can't impose any duties or obligations on you.
Understand, I agree, but they could, in fact, put in their notes say, based on my understanding of the work.
They could definitely do that.
Sure. All right, thank you.
And I think potentially before Salary Commission gets convened, it might make sense for us to touch base with Director Laird. I think we had a touch base for the last one, but we could have another discussion to just talk about what kind of information might be transmitted to the Salary Commission so that they can understand the current duties and scope of the work of council, which is relevant to their decision-making on what the appropriate salary should be. So it sounds like in order to make our decision, we do need to get some of this information back around the benefits piece and whether we would include something around total compensation or benefits just within any of the wording here or direction that's given to the Salary Commission. So hopefully we can get some information back on this one, but it did sound like there's a lot of interest from the council in getting that clarity. So let's move on to the next item, and when we get that information, potentially before we would vote on this, we could see this one more time in committee when we could get the answer to that question and finalize this. But let's move on to number 6, just for the sake of time. And I also am going to note that we have about 3 minutes until we're going to take our recess, but we'll let COO Files do a little intro here.
Sure. So this would be a change to the code about removal of salary commission members. So this change would allow the mayor to remove 2 members of the salary commission per review cycle with a majority approval of the city council. So this goes to the removal of commission members.
Great. And I see Council Vice President Forsyth has her hand up.
Thank you. Yes, this was also something that I had proposed to bring forward. This was in response to last year and making sure that council had a say in the removal of the entire salary commission, essentially. We had no way of reversing that decision, and we are a part of the approval process, so it just seems fair that if multiple salary commissioners need to be removed, that we also have that opportunity to be a part of that decision as well. This still allows the flexibility for the mayor to remove members if they aren't attending. I felt that 2 was a good option for that scope and that limit, but any more than 2 throughout the cycle needed to be run by the council.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to have us go to a 10-minute recess, or actually we'll say 11-minute recess. So we will come back at 8 o'clock in order to support our council colleague observing IFTAR. Thanks. Thank you. And for those following, we're at a Redmond City Council study session, April 9th, 2024. And we're currently discussing the first item on the agenda, which is salary commission. And we're on item number 6 for proposed code revisions, which would be looking at modifying the removal of commissioners' provisions. We just heard some comments from Council Vice President Forsyth, who proposed this idea before we took our recess, and now I'll open it up for questions and comments on this. Councilmember Anderson.
This is a clarifying question. This number of 2 is based on the number of 5 or 7?
I believe it was based on the number of 7, but perhaps Council Vice President Forsyth can comment on that.
Sure. It was in my head, I guess it was based on the number of 7. But it was really just more of it seemed like an appropriate number to not interfere too much with quorum and to allow the flexibility for when members maybe move or aren't showing up, that the mayor can still remove up to 2.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments on this proposal? Giving everyone a moment to think about it. Okay. We have some online. All right. Well, we'll go to those, and then Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you, Council President Kritzer. Your question, is it just on number 6 or as a whole before we move on away from the conversation?
Just number 6.
Got you. Thank you. Then I'll hold my question.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson?
In this case, I would not support limiting the removal. Instead, I would suggest we consider having commissioners remove individuals from the commission if they are not meeting the terms and conditions of participation. I understand the intent behind this and the reasons for it. In terms of maintaining independence, I think it would be better for the commissioners to take it. Maybe the chair of the commission has this responsibility.
Council Vice President Forsyth?
I'm interested to hear the legal perspective of where that responsibility falls, because I do believe it falls on the mayor at the moment and the elected representatives.
So I'll just quickly chime in on that. So it in the current code falls to the mayor, but in the statute it speaks to appointment by the mayor and approval by council, and then in the same subsections, if you will, may only those members may only be removed during their terms for certain reasons. The way that I read that, which is consistent with other similar bodies, is where you have an appointment process, you would stick with that. And so I wouldn't give the advisory board control of themselves.
Thank you. And I would just go as far as to say that I think this is something we should be considering for all of our commissions, not just this one. I just think it's a checks and balances issue. So that's where my opinion lies.
Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, I understand Councilmember Anderson's point, but I would agree with our city attorney that, well, I'm not agreeing with him. Based on what he said, I think it would be a really bad idea to give the chair of the committee control over who gets to stay and who doesn't stay, because that could influence voting and that could influence outcomes. It has the look of perhaps not being fair. So, but I would like to hear from the mayor on this proposal and how that would impact the work or the responsibility that she has.
Mayor Bernie?
Yeah, I don't quite understand your question.
This proposal on the table, what is your reaction to that?
Oh, what would that look like?
What would that be like for you?
right thing.
Are you okay with
Two
it?
members of subject to majority approval by the city council. I mean, it would be interesting to see it in action. That's my best. We don't, to Council Member Forsyth's comment, we don't do this for any other boards or commissions. It would uproot some of the processes, but I don't. I would have to see it in action to see what it would look like, to be honest. So I don't have a great opinion about this, one way or the other.
Okay.
Thank you. And Councilmember Stewart?
Thanks so much. I think that the statute's really clear, especially in section 2 of this chapter, that it couldn't go to be the commission's responsibility to take care of this. But for the proposal at hand, number 6 here, this is one that I don't have strong feelings on per se, but it just makes me more curious about the conversations already had. So I just wanted to ask and give Mr. Kenny an opportunity to share some response to the proposal. If there are other cities that you're aware of or other bodies who use a similar mechanism, or any words of caution or support. Well, you probably wouldn't give us words of encouragement, but words of caution probably. Just any reaction to this that might help inform the decision.
No, I think this is a policy decision, and I won't dip my toe into that. And so I think you can do this. I think you could do a range of different things here, and so I think it's going to be up to you all to decide what you want on this one.
Great. Well, I don't have super strong feelings for my part on this for the body. I do think that it brings some of the responsibility back to the council. So I see an action, a proposal toward a perceived benefit. It also brings perceived responsibility. And so it would be interesting to see, but I don't have strong feelings on this one either way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I support it as it's written there.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Anderson, were you raising your hand, or?
Be happy to make a comment on this.
Yep.
So currently, it states that the mayor may remove up to 2 people. I think what we're looking for is a notification process and an unconfirmation. And I haven't memorized the RMC for all of the commissions, but I think this is the only tool that we've given to the mayor's office to remove individuals. Is that correct?
Mayor Bernie?
I actually don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Okay.
I guess as Council Vice President Forsyth brought up, I don't think we have crossed the bridge on other commissions of what it looks like to remove a commissioner.
I think the perspective I have here is, I think we want to call this section reasons for removal and not identify who can remove them. And this is given what Mr. Kenny just mentioned, is he would have assumed it's a reverse process of what it was to establish to remove an individual. I haven't seen a removal clause in any of the other commissions. So this is where I think it's just stating why individuals could be removed, but I don't see also why that wouldn't be applicable to every other volunteer we have in the city. So it seems to have caused some issue, and just want to point that out.
I believe that some of the reason is that there is a specific state law around these types of commissions. The other type of commission that I know there's state law around is a planning commission, and that also has very specific rules. And these, my understanding, and Mr. Kenny, hopefully you can clarify for us, is that the specific language that we have of the cause for removal is in the state statute. Is that correct?
Yes, so the reasons for removal are directly from the statute, so my request would be to stick with that or stay within those bounds for the reasons. You do have removal procedures for other commissions. I just happened to look up Planning Commission while you were talking, and yes, there is kind of a detailed process there for that. We can look up some other ones. And currently, the code has removal by the mayor. Had that not been there and it was silent on procedure for removal, I would look to the statute, and I would typically say do what was done originally to get them in, but it is silent on removal. It gives the reasons, it doesn't give the process. So I think if you add that, you can do that, which you had done before. And so that's why I say I think the proposal is a valid proposal. If it was silent, I would then go back to the statute and look at how people were put into place.
Thank you. So just for the sake of time, I do see Councilmember Salahuddin has his hand up.
Yeah, just a really quick clarifying question on the language itself. So if it says that the mayor may remove up to 2 members, so say that's 2 members removed. The removal of more than 2 members is subject to the majority approval of the city council. Does that mean if 3 members are removed, would the third one be up to the city council or all 3?
Mr. Kenny, how would you interpret that should we pass this into policy?
Got a hot seat tonight. I love it. So the way that I read it as it's currently written, and again, I think you could tweak it, is it's 2 per review cycle. So it's not 2 at a moment in time. It's per review cycle. And under, let's say council did go with 2A, you would have a 2-year review cycle to get it done by that for the budget. And so it would be 2 during that period. So if it's, the first one in January, the second one in November, and a third one the following January, that's when the council roll would kick in. Because you wouldn't know for the first 2, right, if there's going to be 3 in that review cycle. So it would have to be that it kicks in with the third.
Got it. That makes sense.
Okay. Council Vice President Forsyth?
It sounds like there's some question too around the number 2, and I would be happy to entertain an amendment that removes that if that would appease some of the conversation around this item.
I don't think there's, I didn't hear a huge concern around the number 2, just more whether when you hit the 3 threshold, whether all 3 would then be voted on by the council or just the third person.
I was speaking to Councilmember Anderson's question.
Oh.
Thanks.
And Councilmember Anderson?
My recommendation is to remove the mayor from this item and just state reasons for removal. However, that's not the conversation we're having. In the proposed language, it sounds like the concern is that the commission could lose quorum and then therefore be unable to complete its assignment. And I think that 2 is reasonable given what we understand, but at the same time, it may not be realistic and we may not see something like that in the future. But I think the concern is that it drops below quorum. So I would suggest we use the language, the mayor may not remove more members than quorum or must maintain quorum without council approval to remove members. And in general, I mean, on these volunteer commissions, what we'll see is individuals will remove themselves for one or more reasons, and we'll get a notice of resignation or something like that. And so that's one of the other pieces here is I would suggest we add something about notice to the council.
So what I'm hearing would be, if you were actually doing quorum, would be that you would change it to 3 as the threshold if we were changing to 7. But maybe for the sake of time, we should do thumbs on the current proposal, and then we could also incorporate some potential. We can then get a set of thumbs on whether folks want to change beyond the current proposal. In terms of as it's written, can everyone give thumbs on whether you would like to see this in what we vote on in this final item? I see thumbs online. Councilmember Fields?
I'm not sure. Are you saying, are we voting on whether we like that language or what? what
We're
are we
voting on whether we like the language that includes two for now. And then Councilmember Anderson brought up some other ideas. We can look at that as well, but just this overall as it's written on the page, which I believe you already said that you supported.
Well, yes, but I think Councilmember Anderson makes a really good point. And I think I'm not one of those people to dance around the issue, so I'm going to go to it. I really liked what Councilmember Anderson said, because the part of the reason this is raised is because the mayor fired the entire salary commission. Therefore, they didn't have a quorum. Therefore, they couldn't do their work and left everything in limbo. I'm not going to make an argument whether that was a good action or a bad action, but that left us in, and I still am not clear on what the status is of that work. And I've been biting my tongue, not ask that question all night long. But the proposal from Councilmember Anderson feels like one that I would really like, because the intent is to keep a functioning commission in place, and a quorum is what does that. So it's not about 2 or 3 or 1. It's maintaining the integrity of the commission.
Great. Well, and just to be clear, I wasn't saying we're not going to take up Councilmember Anderson's comments. It was just to consider each of these items. So I think the first is, are we interested in this general idea? So it seems like there is, are you generally interested in this idea? Great. So the second would be whether we, I guess the proposal here, I'm going to summarize it, and if Councilmember Anderson, if you want to clarify, you can, would be that would say that it may remove up to less than a quorum. Is that the language?
Yeah, may not remove, may or may not. I think I like what Mr. Fields said, not challenge the integrity of the commission in terms of the number of participants. So the mayor may not remove more than
What would
quorum,
Quorum?
period.
Okay, and then the removal of more than a quorum of the salary commission per review cycle would be subject to approval by the city council.
That is true. I also think we should say the mayor may not remove members of the salary commission without notice to the council, and the mayor may not remove more than quorum. I don't know that the other piece of this is necessary, but it's understood where it's coming from, so that's what I would suggest. I can
Mr. Kenny?
write this into the chat too.
So just to be clear, if I think I understand the intent, but if I read what you just said, remove more than a quorum, if a quorum is 4, you're saying you can't remove more than 4. So I know what you're trying to say, but I'm just saying I think that's how that would be interpreted. So I think we can just switch those words around to accomplish what I understand that you want.
Right. Yeah.
You can't remove members that would impact the quorum or something like that.
Right, and I just want to also acknowledge the mayor does, if we give the mayor authority to remove individuals, she does need the authority to remove people who are not performing their job. So that's the other condition we probably want, is to have a proposed replacement in a time frame that's reasonable. So this is a challenge because it's complicating an operational task that we're all trying to agree is a good thing to do. So I think I'm happy to help with some of the language on this. I think what I heard is the quorum might get support, and that's the main concern and why I brought that up. So, and notice to council is something else I would add.
Great. So there's the changes around quorum, as well as the additional language that would say will provide notice to council. Councilmember Stewart?
Thanks. I have a clarifying question, and I apologize if it's already been addressed, but what about the, in the event that a commissioner were to resign, does that count in the quota for being removed by the mayor?
Mr. Kenny?
I mean, it depends how it's written, but I don't see why it would, because the mayor didn't take action for one of those reasons to remove that person.
But if someone moves out of the district, out of the city, as was the case of a position we discussed earlier tonight, that would count in the mayor's quota.
If the commissioner resigned, though, then I don't think that would count. Is that correct?
So we would be waiting for the commissioner to send a resignation so that it wouldn't count against the mayor's quota?
I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter. If somebody resigned, then, and we use the language from Councilmember Anderson, then the quorum is 4, so therefore the mayor could reduce 2. If 2 people resign, that makes a quorum 3. It's maintaining the integrity of the quorum. That's the issue. So circumstances ebb and flow, but that one base requirement is still there. So
Mr. Kenny?
Sorry, just one quick thing. In our prior conversation on number 4 on the page, it establishes quorum of 4. And so basically it's 1, 2, or 3 are the numbers we're talking about. It would never go beyond that because, yeah. Assuming it's a full commission at that time, yeah.
And Councilmember Anderson did write in the chat that we're talking about vacancy, not removal in that case.
So I think that the vacancies will add, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You can speak.
Yeah, so the idea of somebody being able to remove people, I think, is when vacancies are created on the commission, it doesn't matter by whom. And that is what the reasons could be for removal versus vacancies being created in general. So if we're looking at a vacancy, the responsibility of the mayor is to fill the vacancy. And theoretically, if a vacancy is created by removal, to be filled immediately. Just to clarify that. And it's hard to talk about quotas of people, so I just want to make sure that that's super clear. We are talking about human beings, so.
Great. Well, it seems like we have some clarity on Councilmember Anderson's proposal, and so I'll just ask council members to give a show of thumbs if you are in support of making the proposed changes from Councilmember Anderson versus maintaining the original proposal by Vice President Forsyth. I'm seeing 2 thumbs here, so it seems like most people want to go, or majority of council wants to maintain it as written, but we will bring this back, so should there be more discussion, we can have a final review on this. Are there any final topics on this that weren't included? Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. I've kind of oscillated on this point number 6, and I guess I just, I might still be have the same position I did earlier, but I do want to bring one thing forward, which is the element of time. So I don't want to rehash the past, but let's say the worst case scenario had happened last time around. Would this system that we are considering tonight have given the city the nimbleness, whether through the shared leadership of the mayor's office and the city council, would the city have had what it needed to protect itself? And wherever we land, I think that we should make sure we are preserving that tool to protect our city. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Salahuddin.
Thank you. My question really quick was when we would expect to see this again. Just wanting to, I appreciated Councilmember Anderson's, proposal and consideration there. And it is a lot of, different language, a lot of different points. And so if, we could also see that in writing, or if we're not considering it anymore, that's okay as well. But I just wanted to see what timeline we're looking at.
My proposal would be, based on the input that we got tonight, that we give that to our staff to incorporate, and we could bring it back to committee, probably not by next week's committee, but maybe if there is room on the following. Otherwise, we could look into early next month for a touch point, and then after that to hopefully move it to consent. So that way, because we can't convene the salary commission until we make these changes to the code. So, I know that that's something the council has said they are interested in.
Yeah, I propose that I can send all the language changes to council by email, and you can give me any kind of feedback, but I will look at a committee that can handle the subject that's not too terribly, doesn't have too terribly many agenda items, and I'll bring it back as soon as I can.
Great, and I would ask council members that, since that'll be in committee, the hope was that we spent a lot of time on this today, and that we can have a final wrap-up in that committee, make the final tweaks, so we can get that to consent, and we don't have that turned into a study session. Mayor Bernie, and then Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about what between Councilmember Anderson and Councilmember Stewart were saying on this number 6 item. If in a worst-case scenario world, you might need to add a clause that the work of the salary commission pauses while that's being discussed by the council, because you could have a bit of an upheaval if there are more members that need to be removed than can be processed by the council because of meeting schedule. So they throw that out there, kind of thinking about what Councilmember Stewart was saying in the quorum idea. So. I think this becomes more complicated than, as Councilmember Fields was asking, how do you see this working? I'm uncertain. I think it needs a little more thought about what the complicating factors might be of it.
Great. Well, good food for thought for our follow-up. Councilmember Anderson, last word on this, and then we'll move on.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you. Really appreciate it, and for walking us through this as well. Last question, food for thought, and happy to help with some of the follow-ups on my end as well. Just in case we've gone to a 7-member commission, one other thought would be what if with a 4-member body, who can break a tie? And that might, yeah. I kind of like to start the wheel spinning in one direction and run away.
Thank you. And actually, I said you'd get the last word, but I do see that Councilmember Nueva Camina has her hand up, so I'll give her that one. Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a clarifying question for myself going back to item number 1 of this. We had moved very quickly, and I didn't get my hand up fast enough, but I want to make sure that we say this for our public, that right now, as far as the code is written, we cannot do a retroactive. That is correct?
That is correct.
So I want to, and it has been, the last time that salary was adjusted or reviewed was 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
2019?
2020 went into effect.
2020. So if we get a commission together by the end of the year, and then it would be first quarter, second quarter of 2025. Is that ballpark correct?
If we can get these code changes in place, Catherine and the Human Resources Department is ready to go ahead and recruit immediately. So our hope would be actually to establish a salary commission this year in anticipation of the budget, so go into effect the 1st of next year.
So then City Council will have been in place without a pay increase for roughly 5 years, where we've seen CPI go up more than 50 points, and our city's been growing over 6% annually. So I just wanted to make sure that we're putting that out there, that council will not have seen an increase in 5 years.
Thanks for those, for that point. Although, one clarifying piece about this in terms of timeline, since you brought it up, is that the commission does have the ability to make their recommendations, should they make them this year, and put those into effect within 30 days.
Within 30 days.
Although they also may make the recommendation to have it go into effect with like January 1. So that would be up to the commission.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Since we're clarifying the clarifying comments, the commission is within its scope of authority to decrease the salary of the council also. So again, the RCWs are provided in the packet, and thanks.
Okay, seeing no other questions on this one, we're going to close it out. We will have another touch point before it goes to a vote. And thank you, everyone, for the discussion. Appreciate it. And thank you to our staff for the work on this. We'll keep Mr. Kenny here for the next item. The next item on our agenda is proposed changes to the council rules of procedure and the Redmond City Council meetings and public participation guide. And I'll introduce this item. So this item was brought up several times by different council members as interest in being able to review some of our some of the rules around our public comment, which, as you all may remember, the public comment that we have at our business meetings is technically a limited public forum, which perhaps Mr. Kenny can give us a little bit more information on that. But it means that we can put specific boundaries around what types of comments we are looking for at that meeting, and if we don't put those boundaries, then just in general, it's governed by the rules of free speech. And so, to that end, we have some interest in being able to look at some of the detail that we provide, both in our rules of procedure as well as our public participation guidelines. And there are some pieces in here that are clarifications of existing practice and on existing rules, as well as some things that are also just adding some suggestions to the audience of what the council would like to see. But I will say that council leadership worked with Mr. Kenny to address issues that have come up, both as questions from the council, as well as some issues that were raised by the public as ideas. And he provided some potential text also based on work on code. So I'll pass it over to Mr. Kenny in case he has any comments, specifically kind of to start us off, to clarify for the listening audience about what a limited public forum is, as well as distinctions between rules of procedure and public participation guidelines, and any other comments you might have.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, the very quick version is a limited public forum. You would have the ability to impose reasonable rules on the participation in the public comment. Those rules need to be viewpoint neutral. And so we would not pick and choose perspectives is one way to look at it. You could have some limitations on the topics that would be presented, and so one of the revisions in here gets to the topic, but not the perspective on the topic. And so some cities have public comment on anything, some have it on agenda items only, and so this is kind of a middle ground, perhaps, of city business as the topic. I think my cautionary tale would be the city touches on lots of things through proclamations and resolutions and committees and all the efforts that you're doing. And so from a topic perspective, it's going to be fairly broad anyway. We tried to draft language that would give some parameters to that and a resource for the chair of the meeting to use to try to rein in a public commenter that is truly outside of the bounds of what city business is, knowing that city business, again, is fairly broad. And so the rules of procedure are the primary document for your rules. The public participation guide is just the way I view it, is kind of the cheat sheet for the public. It's not establishing anything different. It is pulling that through so that people have a place to go to for quicker and easier reference.
Thank you so much. So there are a lot of proposed changes which were in track changes in the document that was attached to this item. I'll go through some of the major ones and then open it up for others to bring up other issues that that they had or questions they had on specific language that's in there. I will note that Mr. Kenny did a great job kind of deep diving on this and also doing just some cleanup clarifications on existing rules. And even you'll see between the rules of procedure and then the public participation guide, some of those changes are just making sure that those documents are mirrored so that if someone checks the guide, they see similar language to what is in our rules of procedure, which is what governs this, as far as I understand. So the first item that I wanted to bring up for all of us, and perhaps COO Files, you can bring up the track chain documents so that way we can look at anything as it comes up, is there's language, as Mr. Kenny noted, that we could add language that specifies that commenters must identify a matter of city business that they wish to comment on. This was responding to some of the issues council members brought up and others about whether there could be some bounds when people want to come to talk about something that isn't necessarily related to City of Redmond, but as Mr. Kenny said, there's a lot of things that are related to City of Redmond, and so a lot could fall under city business. It'd really be if it's something that truly has no nexus or potentially is in a category where they want to come and say, complain about elected official in a different jurisdiction, something like that. So as an example. But I will open it up to see if council members support this change, which just would give a little bit more specificity to what we're looking for. And the other part of this change that I would note is that we added that commenters should write what matter of city business they're interested in when they sign up on the form. And this would also help for those who are doing remote comment. So that way we'd know the general topic that they were interested in speaking about. So I will open it up for questions, comments on that one. And if there aren't any, then we can do the thumbs to get a sense of whether council members are interested in adding that specificity. Mayor Bernie?
I don't necessarily have a comment on that, but as part of that section on page 2, it says the commenter will be asked to end their comments. Is there a more direct thing? Their time will end or something like that, or their microphone be turned off? Or because asking someone to end their comments is different than ending their comments. Is that legally, can we do that?
Yes, and there is a section later that says that process, but we can put that there as well.
I just want to be very clear and direct in if we're going to make changes, so it's very exact, so that commenters know if they don't follow the guidelines that their time will end.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, and I think actually following this, I think we'll address separately some of the pieces around the enforcement of rules. But first, just wanted to touch base on the city business. I guess we'll just go to thumbs. Are folks supportive of adding the detail of city business? I see 3 online. Okay, I see a majority that are supportive of adding the city business piece. Great. So I will go to that next section, which is there's a new section about enforcement of rules. Mr. Kenny, can you give us a little overview on what is included in that section?
Yes, I can. Let me just get back up to that. So that was down below into the new section. So this is a kind of a procedure that was requested to be put in that I can't remember where this mirrors. It was another jurisdiction, and it effectively allows for any member of the council to issue a warning to somebody that is out of line per the rules and creates a process to go through to enforce the rules, and then culminates in the potential inability to provide public comment or inability to, or banning from council meetings for a limited a limited period of time that builds with successive violations. And so if they come back from the first period of time, whether that's commenting or attending, have another violation, it can then be a longer period. And then if it happens again, to a longer period as well. And so this empowers, as written, it empowers individual members of council to take action, so that it doesn't just fall on the shoulders of the chair of the meeting, but council would have the ability to step in and vote otherwise. So it's not, you don't independently act, but you do have the ability to instigate the proceedings.
Great. And I'm not sure if we're actually on that part. Could we scroll down further?
Maybe 2 pages down.
We'll come back to this other paragraph as a separate discussion. Here we go, enforcement of rules. So this is a new section. And this is related to other rules that also show up in here. We did have Mr. Kenny include detail just for transparency, even though it already exists within law, of some of the types of speech that are not protected by the First Amendment, such as fighting words or incitement, some of those things that are outlined in law. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but that would be included in, if those things were violated, you could also take action on enforcement of rules related to those things as well. Is there any other comment you'd have on that, Mr. Kenny?
Yeah, that's correct. And I added those in and included a paren for each one to give a very quick summary. And I also include that controlling law would be applicable for each of those, as those may or may not change. But there are certain things that are just not protected under the First Amendment, like the ones you just described. So those would always be things that if somebody gets up and threatens violence to a council member 10 feet away, that is something that is not protected. But general comments that are generally hateful don't fall into that particular category. So,
no, and there's another section that we can go over that's related to that, since that was brought up by council members, but it wouldn't be grounds to take someone out of the to enforce these rules. So, I guess on this section, do you have a comment, Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I'll admit it is a little hard to follow, but in aggregate, what I remember from the materials is that as council, we would be empowered to interrupt any commenter breaking the rules, offer them one chance to correct? One chance to correct, and then the rest of they would be terminated and from their comment time. And that is really significant because we have those moments where some of us may, disagree or be unsure, but it lays out so much more clearly. And I just really appreciate the work that was done on this, because it is our council meeting that the mayor chairs, as we've discussed a few times, and in order to keep it going and all of that. But it is our meeting, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the tactic here. Thanks.
And I want to be clear for the listening public that part of the reason we're putting this in is that right now we don't have this written down. So for the public is not, so this helps the public know what the boundaries are and also what type of action may be taken. So that way we also have our own set of rules that we're basically governed by on how we would enforce the rules. So it's a tool also for transparency. Mayor Bernie.
I'm trying to understand this in practice, so I'm thinking of a meeting, and if something happens and a council member feels that it breaks these rules, is it an action through the chair, or is it just the council member? Because once again, I want to make sure that we're following our own rules about how meetings are run. So it could be a bit disruptive if it's Do you know, did you see where, you know, I'm thinking worst case scenario, right? So if there's someone saying something and a council member finds it just breaking the rules, that council member just takes charge of the meeting basically and says that you're out of order versus going through the chair. So I'm curious if this could be written in a way that would make more sense to go through the chair versus how I'm reading this right now.
I think that might make sense to clarify through the chair. Although I think that part of this is to empower that if a council member did want to individually issue a warning, they could. There is, if we scroll down, there is a clause that would allow the rest of the council to override that council member's objection. So I'm not sure where that is. But I think it might be the chair. Oh, here we go. The decision of any council member to impose a sanction or exclusion for disruptive activity may be overruled by a majority vote of the council.
Sorry, but yes, other council members can override that council member, but I do curious with Robert's rules if it's actually needs to go through the chair and not just so that's a question.
Mr. Kenny?
Yeah, I mean, as I would envision it, yeah, I would, and we can clarify this certainly, would be like a point of order where the chair would recognize the council member, stop what's happening for that point of order to occur. The very first sentence of this is that the chair of the meeting preserves order and decorum of the meeting at all times. So I think that is the premise. So I agree with that. Having people just take over the meeting to issue a warning or something like that, I think per Robert's rules should be funneled through the appropriate process. So you all can decide, but yeah, we can put that in there to make that more clear.
Great. So it sounds like if council members are supportive of this language, we could clarify the language around how it would work through the chair should a council member raise this, which I think it is assumed that you would call point of order issue your concern, and then the chair would recognize that, as well as that the chair would have the ability to enforce the rules as well. So maybe we need to make sure that is clear.
Yeah, I'm just asking for clarity because you were mentioning clarity for the public, so that seems like would be a good clarification.
Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, I think the mayor is absolutely correct on this. We already do that. We already do point of order. I've done it a couple times during items from the audience. You've done it a couple times during items from the audience. The mayor recognizes that what we don't do, the mayor makes a decision like, sorry, Councilmember Fields, you're violating somebody's First Amendment rights. We don't get that. We haven't taken that opportunity to overrule that chair. But I think it's all in place already in my mind.
I agree. And as I was saying earlier, I think this is just documenting our current practice so that it's more transparent for the public what we'll do, as well as any more detailed follow-up on what would happen if someone repeatedly comes and violates the rules. Councilmember Anderson, did you have a question?
I just have an observation. I find this conversation very challenging that we are using our operating rules to manage other people's behavior, speech, and interactions with us while we also already limit our interaction with them during the meeting. And we might want to look first in the mirror. This is not a court. By our own rules and disclaimer, we are also able to break our own rules of decorum. So we could just shout out whenever we didn't feel that was okay. I just want to make sure that we're kind of keeping focused here. My suggestion would be that we delegate the authority to the mayor and staff to maintain the public participation guide and code of conduct with a periodic review to the FEC committee for informational updates on any language changes here. I totally understand the intentions here. This is operations, not governance. And we may need to step back a little bit and make sure that we're not really, we're capturing the intent where it belongs and not necessarily in legislation, which is what this would amount to.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thanks so much. With respect to my colleague, this conversation we have stepped back from twice and took a measure of consensus of the council to move forward yet again with this. So that's why the city attorney and the staff and the council leadership have invested time in it this time. For those who watch must-see TV on Tuesday nights, you know that this is a conversation we've been having a few times, but recently we committed as the majority of the council wanted to continue forward with this conversation. So that's why we're back here tonight. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any other comments on this. So in terms of this new section on enforcement of rules, I'm going to get a set of thumbs on whether council members would like to see this included in what we vote on in a future item. Oh my God. I see 4 thumbs here. I see a thumb down. I see a side thumb. Okay, so I think we do have a majority interested in including this section, so we will include that. So then I think another item that shows up in here that that also came up as part of some discussion around sometimes when we have a large number of commenters and even some public feedback saying that they don't want to have to wait for 3 hours to be able to speak, is there's proposed language in here, if you can scroll back up closer to the top, that would allow the chair to limit public comments to a minute should there be a large number of public commenters and with a no less than 1 minute, but it would be the chair's discretion to decide how to reduce the time for public comment per commenter just when we have a really large number. So that's a proposal that's in here as well. And I see Council Vice President Forsyth wants to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you. This was, just to be clear, this was allows the chair to adjust the time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute, no less than 1 minute per person. We had initially tried to look at, maybe 90 seconds or 2.5 minutes, but our procedures in chambers don't allow us to go in 30-second increments. So that is why we went to the 1 minute at the lowest end, and then keeping to our 3 minutes as the current rule.
Thank you. And I would also note that this has a provision that the council may override such a decision through a majority of council. So if, say, the chair wanted to limit to 1 minute, but the council didn't want that or wanted to limit to 2 minutes, it could be brought up as a vote and a discussion. Councilmember Salahuddin.
Yeah, thank you. So I would actually, I don't think we should limit the speaker's times. I know a lot of folks do come prepared for their 3 minutes of comment time, and it's our 1 out of 2 chances per month to hear from community members. And I know that sometimes, it does get long, and the meetings do end up, dominated by public comment time. But items from the audience, I think, should be held to be a listening time from council, to council from hearing from the community members. So I wouldn't support limiting any of that time.
Councilmember Fields.
Yes, I agree with council member. I don't think we should limit the time. And I would just throw in as a thought, one of the things we've done in the past is we've had periodic listening sessions. I think when you think of the bigger picture and the balance, when we only give that opportunity at business meetings twice a month, and we don't give that other opportunity to have neighborhood meetings and some of the other things we've talked about over the years, I think that time is very precious to the people. And we should acknowledge that it's very difficult to leave your house, get babysitters, do whatever, and prepare a 3-minute speech, and it's usually pretty emotional and pretty intense. So it's a recipe for disaster in my mind to go, hey, sorry, tonight you only got a minute, even though you spent 6 hours trying to prepare for this. So I agree with Councilmember Salahudin.
Other comments on this? Questions? Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. I agree that they shouldn't be limited down to 1 minute when they're coming, for three, understanding, for those that are participating. And I don't know if this is the right place, but it seems like a pertinent or a relevant spot to put it in is then when it's a business meeting, and if there's things that we need to vote on, and it's particularly an evening that's going to go long because the public has something to say about it, what measures do we have in place where if public comment goes considerably long and it's late in the night and we're supposed to be voting on something, that we're not voting on something when we're absolutely exhausted? Did I communicate that clearly?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if we have, if one of the staff or mayor could speak to that in terms of what our current ability is within what we have now.
I'm happy to speak to that. Another option versus limiting people's time is to rearrange the agenda so that the business can be taken care of and then continue on with public comment. So that is always an option. I think one of the challenges we have is if people making comments on, say, consent agenda items, then that would be, make it a challenge for people to comment on the thing you're voting on. But if you do follow the guidelines of having people write down what they'll be speaking on, it would be easy for me to see if people are going to be commenting on, say, consent agenda items, for example. But that was a very long-winded way to say you can always rearrange the agenda to get the business done and then still have time for public comment.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Another thing to remember is that our current rules do not allow business to be considered after 10:30 p.m. That's in section F of our current council rules. And another tactic that sometimes bodies take is to limit public comment to, say, no more than 90 minutes. The problem with that is if every person took their full time in the 90 minutes, then those at the end of the list, just because they weren't there first, wouldn't be able to speak. So I do actually think empowering the chair to make a different decision to shorten the amount of time so that we can hear from more people rather than fewer people for a longer period of time is actually more elegant, in my opinion, and that I would support the change as it's proposed in the document.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this? Councilmember Anderson?
I support Councilmember Salahudin's comment earlier as well.
All right. Well, just for the sake of time, let's do a show of thumbs for those who would be supportive of the language as proposed. I'm going to look at... We do have 4 thumbs here, so we'll bring that forward as some language, and if council members have disagreement or additional thoughts on that, can bring them up as when we vote on this or review it again, depending on how we proceed on this. So the next item that is in here as well that I just wanted to highlight, and then I think after that, or I think there are 2 more items that I wanted to highlight for discussion, and then we'll open it up in case there's anything else, is that there had been some discussion amongst the council around how to address issues of hate speech or derogatory language used in our chambers. And we had Mr. Kenny look at this issue. And the suggestion is essentially to have in there some language that shares, if you can scroll right back up. Language that that establishes what we ask of the public, but it does not mandate it. So it says the city respects and values a diversity of opinions and perspectives, but asks that all comments be free from hate, harassment, obscenities, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on age, race, ethnicity, country of origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, religion, income, political persuasion, or cultural practices. So this lays out what we hope commenters will do, and council members could speak up to remind commenters that this is what we are asking them to do, although there are some boundaries around what we might be able to require them to say. Mr. Kenny, do you have any other comments on that?
Just briefly, because the rules need to be viewpoint neutral, the easiest and maybe most ridiculous way to look at it is if you're okay with good things being said, you've got to be okay with bad things being said on a particular topic. And so by pulling in kind of expectations and the value statement, and was it a resolution that council passed not that long ago that final paragraph came from, that line, or large part of that paragraph came from. So it's to express the continuity of expectations and kind of the value statement. But somebody may get up and speak ill of a person, a group, a thought, an opinion, or what have you, and that would be fine, and we would let that occur. The reality is, under the First Amendment, hate speech really isn't a thing that is dealt with in these situations. That other paragraph where I put in all of those items that are not protected under the First Amendment are things. Hate speech is not one of those. And so somebody may have poor things to say about whatever, and that would be allowed, even though we're asking for that not to happen.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you so much. And on that, I just want to recognize each and every one of my colleagues. Sometimes on any particular night, any one of us can be impacted by hate speech in our chambers. And on the nights that any one of us is impacted, we do more work that night. And we see you when it happens. And the First Amendment, the current interpretation of the First Amendment is the current interpretation of the First Amendment, but you're seen, and we know that you do extra work. On this topic, on the public participation guide, in my packet, it's on page 39 where it starts, but I'm looking at the second new paragraph. Yeah, the second paragraph on this, it says the city respects and values diversity of opinions and perspectives, but asks that comments be free from hate. Can that be an and? I think that is actually more viewpoint neutral if it's an and. Thanks.
Mayor Bernie?
So I think that this is the crux of one of the big issues that are happening, not just in our community, but actually all over the nation in council meetings and school board meetings, is that people are using the platform for hate speech, or it's not hate speech, it's whatever you call it. For it speech that's offensive to some people. And so, part of, thinking of chairing a meeting and how to manage this. So I think part of staying with the business of the city is actually a tool that we can use to help us manage when it's encased in some of this other stuff that is harder to manage. Just throw that out there.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so just, I don't know if we need I guess I will just do show of thumbs for including that language and that suggestion to the audience. I'm seeing 5 thumbs on that. Were there thumbs over here? Okay. Great. So that seems like we are agreed on that one. And then the last item that I just wanted to bring up before I'll open it up in case there are other issues that people wanted to raise, that's included in here. I was just looking at my note, is that we mirrored the changes that show up in the first part in the public participation guide, and just wanted to see if there were any comments on how any changes were mirrored in the participation guide. Councilmember Anderson.
That was my question from the last item. So we were looking at this participation guide while you were asking for thumbs. So my thumb is on this, partly for the same reasons I mentioned. This is what we should adopt if this is what we are legislating. And that's just my question here is, are we going to be adopting the public participation guide as the rules for code of conduct for a meeting? Or is it two separate documents that have the same stuff in it?
Mr. Kenny?
Well, I guess you could do it however you want, but the council rules of procedure, which was effectively the first half of this document, is adopted by council, and then that is pulled through into this document. And so the approval really is on the first document, and I would expect no differences in the second document, though the second document does include some things on process to provide remote comment, just adding in existing things. So we can certainly get a motion on that, but it would be just in supplement to the other document.
So a clarifying question on this, what's in the way of adding this now to the public participation guide without council approval? I don't think you're seeking council approval on the public participation guide.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, the public participation guide is just a reflection of the council rules of procedure
But it also has other stuff in it.
for more clarity, but only from a process, not from a
Okay.
substantive.
I think you see my point. That's good. Thank you.
I think for transparency and for the council, just giving clear direction, and not necessarily we have to, but I think we brought this forward as a package so that the council could approve, just to give clear direction to the staff on what should be updated in that guide in response to what would be updated within our rules of procedure. So I would say this is as a set. And unless there's concern about that, we can make sure that if there's any changes to one part as part of the final discussions here, that it is reflected as part of what shows up in the public participation guide. Are there any other questions on this? Any other issues before we would bring this potentially for a vote at a future council meeting? Councilmember Stewart.
Thanks so much. We've been kind of in the logistics of it all and kind of having an internal focused conversation. But I just wanted to take a moment for the listening public to appreciate your feedback. The public's feedback over time has been really helpful. Obviously, I think we've gotten lots and lots of comments. I get questions all the time, but how can you let it be? How can hateful words be said in a public building? And as we've been discussing some of the limitations tonight, I think that if the majority of our community had its way, we would be able to go even further. So I think what has been worked on with the staff and the city attorney and the council leadership, I'm just very grateful for the integration of so much of the feedback that we've been getting from community. And I look forward to test driving them and seeing how it works and putting it into practice. Thanks.
Councilmember Fields.
So earlier this year, I think I'm the one that brought it up initially this year, when my concern was that we were potentially liable for allowing someone to use our public forum to slander another individual. That was my main concern at the time, is that we were using everybody's time, the public's time, our time, to give somebody a platform to talk about a personal attack on a Bellevue council member or whatever. And the city attorney said that we probably weren't at risk of we weren't at risk of participating in a slanderous activity. That was my main concern. And the question I guess I have is, I'm concerned about a direction here and a message that we're sending to the public that they can't be themselves, they can't speak how they speak. I'm thinking of a lot of things I've heard over the past few weeks that were weird to me personally, but that's how people express themselves, and it's within their First Amendment rights. So I guess the question I have for council is, how much of a problem do we actually think this is? I mean, do other council members see a lot of this, these violation of our values and our, not ethics, but our, what do we call it? Our desires for respect and diversity and lack of hate speech. I mean, do we really think there's a problem other than just a few? Because I don't.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Fields, for that question. Councilmember Forsyth.
I would tend to agree that we don't have a broad issue. We have some folks that have put us at risk for potential issues, and I think the first thing that we covered, which speaks to community members should speak on city business, which was the loosest possible interpretation that we could come to, what our council, who values freedom of speech, could come to as far as some guardrails for this content. And the instance in particular that you referenced, Councilmember Fields, this would have given the chair the opportunity to say you need to speak to something that pertains to city business, since that particular example did not. When council leadership was meeting with Mr. Kenny, we very clearly talked about how our council very much upholds value of freedom of speech and wanting to make sure that our community feels that they can come and talk and be themselves and tell us, when they're upset, and tell us when they're frustrated, and tell us when they're happy, and tell us when we're doing things right. So that was very much wrapped into the context of the conversations that council leadership had with the city attorney. And hopefully we've captured that in these modifications that are before us tonight.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Appreciate those words. And I will also reiterate for the listening public that at least from my perspective, I really love listening to public comment, being able to hear perspectives from our community. I think it's a really important piece of the work that we do. And to Councilmember Fields' point, I know that our council is going to be working on providing even more opportunities to engage with the public in town hall and community conversation forums and other opportunities for outreach in this upcoming year, and just increasing that overall. And just want to specify that this is not intended to limit voices, but more to just be clear about what the boundaries are, so that if we do any sort of enforcement, we can do so fairly because the rules are written down rather than being unwritten, which to me doesn't feel fair actually to the participants if we don't let them know what the rules and guidelines are, but we cut off their mic. So I think this is really important for us to actually have this written down from my perspective. So it sounds like we processed through most of the issues and questions tonight and gave some direction. We can follow up on a few of those final tweaks and get that updated language sent out to the council. My proposal would be that we put this on new business at an upcoming business meeting. So that way, since there was some disagreement on some of the items, should council members want to raise any of those when we take the final vote, you'll have the ability to do that or vote yes or no. Does that sound good to everyone? Not seeing any objections here, seeing some thumbs, so we will close out this item. This took quite a bit longer than we originally intended, but I think we did some good process, and thank you, Mr. Kenny, in particular, for all your hard work on this. Appreciate that, and thanks to you all. I will take a pause here and just note to the council that we still have 3 items on the agenda. One is council talk time, which I think we could keep fairly short, but we do have 2 media items still on our agenda, which means that we may have to extend the council meeting beyond the 10:30 p.m. time. And just wanted to get a sense, we don't have to make that motion at this moment, but wanted to get a sense if everyone is good with that. Just if staff are going to wait around especially for the 2050 item. Just wanted to get a sense of whether everyone will be good to keep going after we do the next item on the agenda. If I don't see any objections, then I'll assume that we're good to do that since we do want to get through the items on the agenda tonight, but wanted to put it out there in case anyone strongly objects to us going past 10:30. Okay, not seeing that, so we will proceed with the next item. The next item on the agenda is Police Technology Update, and Police Chief Darrell Lowe will introduce this item.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me tonight. Just want to take a little bit of time to talk with you guys about some of the public safety technologies that exist and that are being considered for potential implementation into the police department. Very briefly, we're going to talk about 5 different technologies tonight, starting with automated license plate readers. We will revisit force metrics, which we had a conversation about at our last committee meeting. Real-time information centers, what's known as drones or UASs, but specifically DFR, which is a drone as a first response program. And then lastly, we'll talk about school and park zone speed cameras. So first, starting with the automated license plate readers. With those, we have currently in-car video camera systems. It has the ability to be a mobile automated license plate reader. Simply back in, we flip a switch, we have that particular ability. If you go ahead and bring up the presentation. One of the other technologies that exist and that is being used in many jurisdictions, not just here in Washington, but across the country, is a fixed license plate reader. Flock Technology is a particular company that is currently being utilized. What this fixed license plate reader does is it's fixed at a location at a intersection, the entrance to a community, et cetera, and it captures data points. When we think of license plate readers, I know there's concerns about public identifiable information, registered owner information, driver's faces, et cetera. These technologies do not capture that information, and if we think of it as simply a data point, so that license plate is a data point at that particular location, at that point in time, at that that latitude, longitude. If it's from a mobile license plate reader, it's a license plate or a data point that comes within the field division of that particular in-car camera at that point in time. What you see there on the display is from this fixed license plate reader. That is the image that is captured, and as you see for the public, it shows the back end of a vehicle and the right side panel of a vehicle. So you can identify, in this particular example, it's a black pickup truck or a red pickup truck. So again, you don't see any information about the registered owner. You don't see any information about who's driving the vehicle or who is in the vehicle. From a police perspective, it provides us information. So if we get information that a crime has occurred and there's a description of a suspect vehicle, we can then go back and look through these systems and see if a vehicle matching that description came, within view of, in this case, one of the fixed license plate readers. One of the other tremendous benefits of this technology is if a vehicle that is, they say if it's on a hot sheet, so if a stolen vehicle, a vehicle that's wanted in connection with a crime, with a missing or endangered person, if it comes across one of these fixed license plate readers, then both our dispatch center and the officers on duty will get a notification that a vehicle has alerted at this particular location. I'll use an example of an issue that we've had here recently in Redmond, but that is occurring around the region. Recently, we had one of our local businesses, a dispensary, that was targeted for burglary on a couple different occasions. On each of those occasions, the vehicles used were stolen vehicles. If we had a fixed license plate reader at Westlake Sammamish off of the 520, when that vehicle got off the freeway, we would get an alert that a stolen vehicle had just come, through that particular point. It would allow officers on duty to respond to that particular area to try and, locate the vehicle, et cetera. And we would have been, I'll say in time and space where we could have intervened or perhaps prevented that particular type of crime. What else? From the other aspect of it, if we have a crime that occurs at a location where there are a number of vehicles, and I'll use Redmond Town Center, for example. So if there's a crime or circumstance that occurs there, we have a number of vehicles in the parking lot. Currently, what an officer has to do is they have to physically walk the parking lot and manually notate all of those license plate or all those data points that are there. If we have this technology, or if we activate this technology, we could simply drive the aisles of the parking lot, capture that information, and then be able to follow up on it at a later point, or at a larger apartment complex, the same thing. We can put vehicles at a place and time that is very helpful for investigations and follow-up. So with that, some of the surrounding communities that currently have or are in the process of exploring this particular technology, Medina, Clyde Hill, Yarrow Point, Yakima, Newcastle, Des Moines, Bothell is currently looking at it, and then within our community, the Woodbridge Homeowners Association actually has or is in the process of getting these fixed license plate readers as well. So for this particular technology, it's available not just to law enforcement agencies, but homeowners associations or private groups can also utilize this technology. And then at that point, they have the ability, should they choose, to share that information with us and vice versa. So if we were to move forward with this type of technology, we would enter into agreements with our local law enforcement agencies to be able to share that particular information. Some of the other things as it relates to the privacy points and pieces, the information is only kept for 30 days, so it's not kept for an indeterminate period of time. There is audit capabilities within the system, so in order to access the system to go in and look for a particular vehicle that may be suspected of or potentially associated with criminal activity, there has to be a legitimate, I'll say, criminal purpose for it. There has to be a report number attached with it, so it's not just information that is just, searchable, without cause or reason. And then there's, like I said, audit capabilities behind it. So with that, I'll pause and answer any questions that you may have as it relates to the automated license plate reader technology.
Are there questions from the council? Councilmember Fields.
So one of my wife's hobbies is noticing all the expired tabs. And she tells me like every other week, hey, there's like 30% of the cars out there. So is this going to capture that?
This is not a enforcement tool, so it would not capture expired tags. It's not a speed camera, so it is not for enforcement purposes. It is strictly for a deterrent factor and for, I'll say, follow-up capabilities. And then probably the most critical part is if a vehicle that has already been entered into the system passes one of these devices, it will notify the folks that are on duty. So it essentially is an efficiency, I'll call it tool, for our on-duty personnel.
Thank you. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Thank you. So it will come as no surprise that I find all of these technology options a bit big brothery and a bit disturbing, especially in the flock information that was provided that says residents can opt in or opt out and figure out who doesn't belong. That just seems a bit much for my tastes. But as you were speaking and mentioning some of the potential uses, it triggered my brain to question, would potential silver or amber alerts also be input into this system so that we could then use that information to find folks who are missing and or lost?
Absolutely. So any vehicle that goes into the national database or system would trigger both on a fixed and a mobile automatic license plate reader. And in the case of a fixed license plate reader, using the silver alert example, if that vehicle were to pass by, again, it would notify both our dispatch center and all on-duty personnel that that particular vehicle is at this particular location at this time, allowing us to, respond and, reunite that person, with their family.
And are you proposing one over the other, or do we already have, it made it sound like we already maybe have the in-car versions currently?
So currently our in-car cameras are capable of automatic license plate recognition. That functionality has not been activated. I would look to do both. I'll say for the most efficiency, both of them would work. Looking bigger picture for the city, we would be probably looking at about 12 cameras total for coverage for the entire city. And then looking at it from the perspective of it's not every corner, every intersection is kind of providing kind of like a safety net, if you will, for us. So ingress and egress points within the city. I mentioned the on and off ramps for 520. A lot of the retail theft that we see at our big box stores on the east end of town, oftentimes those thefts occur. They leave the location and hop right on 520. So again, it would allow us that information to identify suspect vehicles. And then what we're seeing is a lot of stolen vehicles coming from other parts of the region into Redmond. So again, once they entered into our jurisdiction, we would be notified that that a stolen vehicle, wanted vehicle, or a vehicle associated with crime in another jurisdiction was entering Redmond, and then would allow us to respond to that location. I'll say worst case scenario as just a deterrent, best case scenario to allow us to actually apprehend and arrest, the suspects.
So this is a two ask then. So you want to enable the versions in the car and install the fixed versions.
Yes, I'll say at the appropriate point, I will come back to council and ask for both the funding for the fixed assets and the authorization to activate the in-car asset that we already have.
Okay. Thanks for the info.
Thank you. And just following up on this, is this ask going to come back during the budget, or it would come back sooner?
Most likely, during the budget cycle, preliminarily, it would not be a large ask, but it would be part of, I'll say, our internal conversation as it relates to the police department's above baseline, budget process or ask.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Stewart.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate the conversation. You mentioned that we would probably need somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 cameras. What about the system that the Woodbridge HOA is setting up? Would we enter into any kind of data sharing agreement with that private entity in our city that also has this technology?
Yes, once they are up and running, the intention is that they would provide us with the ILA and share the information that they capture, I'll say with their system and within their community with the police department. So we would have that same functionality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I do think it's interesting. I think I don't watch a lot of TV or network TV, but I think probably a lot of people in our community assume we already have this capability just given what is on TV. So it's an interesting conversation. I had one more question. I'm so sorry. Regarding the in patrol vehicle technology, that's really compelling. When I went on my ride along a while back, it was really fascinating. Just the one of the things that's a normal everyday thing and not supposed to be your big takeaway. But as our patrol officers are driving through parking lots or driving down the road, they are just like constantly typing in license plate numbers and whatnot. So if this in any way reduces the burden on that, which to me looked, that would be distracted driving for me. They are professionals. But anyway, so interesting conversation. Thanks for bringing this forward.
Thank you. I guess I would add one more comment on this myself. Oh, and I see one other hand raised, but since I'm in the middle of it, I will just add my comment, which is that I think this also has some compelling uses and appreciate you sharing about those. I think if we get to the point of adopting this technology, I would be interested, along with some of, I think what we discussed actually earlier around data governance and privacy would be, I appreciated that Flock has their sets of how they use the data, but we may also want to establish exactly what the uses will be for this in writing as city policy and have the city council weigh in on that so that we are clear to some of the questions that Council Vice President Forsyth raised of how this will be used and how it won't be used, and that can be something that could be transparently shared with the public. Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. I love that we're having these conversations. It's very, very interesting. Chief, I know that in Washington State, we've got the lowest number of police officers per capita. We're dealing with staffing issues and onboarding overall. Have you had an opportunity to take a look or even a consideration around how this will impact the efficiency or bandwidth of our staff, of our officers, and been able to quantify that at all at this point, or is it still way too early for that?
Yeah, I don't know that I could make a quantification of it, but what I can say is to Councilmember Stewart's point, it would relieve one additional function from the officer because the technology would do a lot of this for them. And again, this is centered around vehicles that are already wanted or associated, with criminal activity. So using the example, as the officer is driving through the parking lot, even though it's capturing that data point from the license plate, it's not going to Department of Licensing. It's not pulling the registered owner information. It's not pulling any identifiable information. But if that vehicle that is parked in that parking lot was stolen from another jurisdiction and sitting there, it will alert the officer that there's a stolen vehicle right there. So from that perspective, it adds a level of efficiency. It may remove one, I'll say, repetitive task from the officer having to manually, enter all the license plates or get on the radio to broadcast that license plate to a dispatcher to have them enter it in. So I think in that sense, that's probably the best I can do from a quantification perspective, but not actually from a numerical quantity.
Thank you.
Great. Why don't you move on to the next item, and then we'll take some more questions. But potentially, let's have you just do the full presentation, and then we'll do questions at the end.
Go ahead and hit the next slide. So this here was force metrics, which we briefly discussed at the last committee meeting. And just as a reminder, and for the public, this here is I'll call it a search engine overlay for our existing CAD and RMS data. It essentially takes the information that we have. It's not using open source information, so it's not a name or an address or a person search from the internet. It's actually taking the information that either is already in our system or that is provided to our dispatcher, and it allows the staff to more rapidly search through all of our various systems, with one input, as opposed to now if an officer wants what's referred to as a premise history. So if they want to know the history of our response to a particular location, they have to make that request. One of our dispatchers has to go into a separate system. They have to run that particular address. They get the returns, but it's each individual date, call, et cetera, and they would have to open it up and kind of briefly scan it to provide the officer with that requested information. What you have here in the display shows a keyword search for drugs. And so what that does is then they did a 3-year range. So we'll go back, again, looking only at our data and the information that we have. It will bring that information back. It also provides a map aspect of it, so you can get a more holistic perspective of the types of things that are occurring within your jurisdiction. If you look at, in this particular example, it will show what I'd referred to before as the tags. So it will show at this particular location, based on the previous calls for service, based on the information that was either provided to the dispatcher or that was put in from the officer, that there are also alcohol and drugs related. This was a drug search, so you would expect to get that information back. But on that first call, it also mentions a gun. So again, it aggregates data that we already have, so the officer has a clearer picture of what he or she is going into, and it creates, again, an efficiency of not having to search through multiple systems. And much like your internet searches, it's hyperlinked, so then the officer has the ability, if a particular return or incident is of interest, they can look at it, they click on it, it opens it up, and again, it's just an efficiency part or piece. At Councilmember Field's suggestion, I did go back and speak with the company, because initially we were looking at potentially a 5-year contract with the particular company. They did agree to a 2-year contract with potential renewals. So thank you for the suggestion. It was beneficial. And then with this particular asset, at a point in time down the road, probably 27 or 28, we would be looking to upgrade and replace our CAD and RMS system. This particular overlay, since it would be able to, I'll say, aggregate and take all of our data, in that particular project, it will save us somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million to $1.5 million, because we wouldn't have to then pay the new CAD RMS vendor to, basically capture and translate all of our data. It will already do it. So it's not just the efficiencies of the search overlay, but it has the potential to have significant cost savings for us down the road for a technology project that we most likely are going to have to endeavor. The current system we have is 25, 28 years old. So at a point, we're going to have to, consider the replacement and upgrading of that particular system. What was the next thing? And the other thing, and this is more conceptual. I don't have a proposal or any indication or desire just yet. But a real-time information center is something that should also be considered as we start to look at technologies. As we mentioned, we have body-worn cameras, we have in-car cameras, we have fixed license plate readers, we have city traffic cameras. So there are a number of video sources and things that are available to our staff. At some point in time, it would make sense to bring all of that in real time into one central location, so that, again, that the officer has a more holistic picture of what is occurring from all of these different technological sources. The next thing we talk about, so in 2018, the city or the police department started with a drone program, or a UAS system. Fast forward, as technology has improved and gotten better, a number of agencies have piloted and started to utilize drones as a first responder. And what that is when a call for service comes in, the drone is launched. In our testing here thus far, we can get from basically the City Hall campus here to anywhere in the city within 2 minutes. It provides the officer with an aerial perspective of what is actually occurring occurring at that particular location. The pilot is a commissioned police officer, so you have a police response. But what other jurisdictions have seen is up to a 25% decrease in the actual need for a police officer to respond. So it's not your traditional alternative response in the sense of it's not a human being unarmed going. It is actually the UAS going overhead, assessing the circumstance and situation, and then being able to provide that information as to whether or not an officer needs to reply or needs to respond. In some circumstances, if the officer is responding to lights and sirens because it's a traffic accident with unknown injuries, the UAS gets there and, within that minute and a half, they can make an assessment and then say, okay, it's a non-injury based on the fact that the people have exited the vehicle, et cetera. And then the officer doesn't have to respond to lights and sirens, which reduces, I'll say the risk to both the officer and the public of that particular emergency response. If the call is, still in progress, again, you have a police officer with a visual observation overhead that can relay that information to the other responding officer, so we know exactly what it is that we're looking at. And getting ourselves into. So with the drone as a first responder concept or idea, we're going to pilot it and see what it looks like, and I will come back to you in about the next 90 days or so with the statistics as to what this looks like, how it works, and whether or not we would advocate and look to formalize a program moving forward. And then lastly, the school and park zone speed cameras. Included in your packets was some speed zone information. We had a study done back in June of last year just to kind of get an idea as to what we were looking at as far as the number of violations. If you've had a chance to look at your packet, I'm sure it was somewhat alarming and shocking to see the speeds of the particular vehicles. In some particular cases, we had up to 64% of the vehicles that passed by that particular location speeding, and oftentimes double the posted speed limit. The posted speed limit in school zones is 20 miles an hour. We had vehicles traveling 40, 45 plus miles per hour. And so I believe that there is a very strong case for us to implement the school zone cameras, also our park zone cameras. One of the questions that was asked was about revenue generation. So this is not about revenue generation. Yes, there may be some positive revenue aspect, from the implementation of this program, but it's more about the safety of our pedestrians and slowing our vehicles down. I know, we are a Vision Zero city, and we're trying to, ensure the safety of our pedestrians, our bicyclists, et cetera. So I think this program, both for schools and for our parks, is consistent with that particular commitment. And then if council's in favor, we would then have a updated study done to get the current data, get the contracts and everything situated, and then come back for approval to actually move forward with implementing both the school zone and park zone camera program. And with that, that is all 5 items.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if you covered the real-time information center fuses item.
I touched on it briefly. So the concept with that is just taking all of the technology and all of the data and bringing it in through one, I'll say, a vessel or vehicle. I mentioned we have a number of different video streams and sources. So Fusus is a particular technology that takes a number of different video sources and brings it into a central location. So, for example, city traffic cameras, body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, they can all be essentially streamed through this, Fusus hub and then brought into a workstation, for a dispatcher or Yeah, basically that would be brought into a workstation for a dispatcher to have all of that information simultaneous, basically like on one screen or on one display. So you may have multiple sources, but it's all being brought in at the same time for use on that particular call or situation.
Got it. Thank you very much. So my understanding, just for clarification for council members, is that the ALPR and the fuses and the speed zone cameras are items that you'll be bringing back more specific proposals on to us in the future, but we can give you some input on tonight. And drone as a first responder is one you're already piloting. And then the one that specifically is asked to go to consent is the force metrics item. Is that correct as a summary, just in terms of the feedback that you're looking for tonight?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So with that, we will turn over to council member questions. Just wanted to clarify some of the follow-up on this before we get started. Councilmember Forsyth.
Okay, I will dive in with a fire hose of opinions. And I'm sure that surprises everyone. For the speed zone cameras, I am in favor of school zones if they are used in conjunction with the flashing lights. I have personally experienced where these are put into place in school zones that don't have flashing lights, and for particularly our Washington schools, we don't have a standard set time of day that you can always expect a school zone to be in play. So I'm definitely in favor of them when there are flashing lights in conjunction. As far as the parks zone element, I understand that is also part of the state code, that it allows us that as well. I would want to see some more data around that one. For the drone application, I'm interested in how many times we've actually used that that technology, because I know you've brought it forward to us before and it's been fairly minimal. At least maybe I'm thinking of 2 years ago, especially that there was one where a car got launched into someone's yard and we used the drone for that. So interested in a little more data around that one. And then as far as the one that has the direct ask currently, that was scheduled to be on this study session that was initially proposed for consent. So I just want to clarify that open source does not mean open to the internet. So when I had asked my question about other potential vendors of this, I know Olympia is using one that is an open source that is basically just means it's not proprietary technology, that we could actually have more of an ability to draft how that data is being pulled into our other sources. So going back to Councilmember Fields' question about opening this up for an RFP, I know you went back to the company and they said that they could do a shorter contract, but have we looked at alternative options?
Two things real quick. So for UAS flights, we did 238 flights last year, not from a first response perspective, but for suspect searches, assisting our SWAT team with search warrants and various things of that nature. As far as the actual usage as a first responder, we've probably have about 24 thus far, as we've been ensuring that the technology is working and getting things lined up to do the actual pilot. So yes, I will come back with actual first response call data towards the end of summer. As far as for the force metrics, it's not open source in the sense of it's not pulling outside data from other sources. So this is an overlay for our existing CAD and RMS system. So it's only giving us the information that we already currently have. I'm not looking for an application that goes out and to say, LexisNexis is a very popular one. Our investigators use that, and then that goes out and pulls information from other sources. But that's also a pay per search type of application, like I said, that we specifically use in an investigative capacity. Like I said, this here is strictly the existing CAD and RMS data, not coming from outside sources, not being shared anywhere.
But were there other alternatives quote requests to this one company?
Not like this, no. So it is sole source and proprietary in how this particular software application works. Again, there may be other applications, but not specific to this, where it aggregates only your CAD and RMS data. Most other ones that do exist do reach out to other sources, and I believe that gets into the area that we're trying to avoid, and that is our information being accessible and out there to other individuals, or using open source things for, I'll say, our day-to-day type of activities. I don't believe there's as big of a concern with us using information that we already have from a historical perspective if we've been to a particular location multiple times.
Okay. And then as far as the funding source, as far as the funding source, as this was initially proposed, it was going to have the $30,000 that council set aside. Is that still part of your current proposed funding?
No, I've spoken with the finance director, and we have contingency funds available for this particular contract.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I actually had a similar question, so that answered that one for me. Councilmember Salahuddin?
Yeah, thank you so much for all of this information. I'll keep my comments/questions fairly brief. I think with the school speed zone, I appreciate Council Vice President Forsyth's questions on the parks, but with regard to the school zones, I think it makes sense. We definitely need to be looking out for these high speeds within our school zones. My one question there would be looking at the posted speed limits on several of these locations is 20 miles per hour, but when we see the high speeds, Rose Hill Middle School, for example, Northeast 75th Street, has much lower high speeds, like the highest speed than, say, Redmond High School. So are there other mitigating factors that we could look into with regard to our roads to make sure that we are also preventing these, top speeds? Because, 45, 47 is, ridiculous when it comes to our school zones. So that's one question there. Also, I would, again, agreeing with Council Vice President Forsyth, would love to see more of the data on the UAS, but I will say, just vouching for this type of program, I used to be involved with a Eastside Fire and Rescue UAS drone program, and just the ability for use of that technology, I think, would be very beneficial for our first responders. So I would be an advocate of that, just looking at more data. That would be really interesting as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, going back, sorry, Council Vice President, I didn't address your other 2 points. So for the school zone cameras, the enforcement only occurs when the beacons are activated, and it's 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after the school hour. So that's how the program is set up, and we will ensure that that occurs as from a quality control perspective. And then upon implementation, typically what you see is that that first 30 days, you will see those high numbers. The first 30 days, violators will get written warnings notifying them that they were in violation. Here's what their posted speed was. So that's kind of the grace period or the learning curve for individuals. And then actual enforcement will start after that 30 days. And then typically the set speed is 7 to 8 miles over posted. So if he's in the handout, 27 miles would be the infraction point where a violation would actually occur. I know at one point in a conversation or a comment, so the company does not control the trigger point. That would be something that would be controlled by us as the administrators of the system. And like I said, just in our preliminary conversations, 7 miles over posted would be what the likely recommendation would be for the policy and implementation of the speed zone cameras.
Thank you for that additional information. Are there other questions? Councilmember Stewart?
Thanks so much. On the force metrics slides, thanks for the screen grabs, if you will, to show us a little bit more about how that works. On the slides and around page 80 of our packet, there's some community welfare trends that track various indicators on 911 calls and police reports at the intervals of last week, last month, and last 3 months. You demonstrated a couple on the slides related to drug-related calls and child welfare support calls, but it does look like there is a mental health intervention menu, and that's just of interest to our community. Can you tell us a little bit about what kinds of indicators you might be able to track with this system and what you wouldn't be able to track?
So with it, when we work with the engineers from the company, we can identify what those data points are. So it would then be able to go through stuff, mental health. So if mental health was mentioned either in the incoming call, in the officer's notes, or in the actual report, it would be able to grab that information. Probably a better and a quicker example was with the Narcan one. So it has the ability, if Narcan is mentioned, but not just the fact that it was mentioned, so the officer, by way of protocol, if they administer Narcan, they will broadcast that to the dispatch because it has a medical component, so that way AID knows that Narcan was administered at this time. So if that particular call involves drugs or a drug overdose and the officer indicates that Narcan was used, that's how we're able to go back and say how many applications we had, et cetera. If it was a mental health aspect, we could have it say how many calls involved mental health. The subset of that would be from that call, if it mentioned mental health, was the disposition involuntary commitment, was a voluntary commitment, so we can, I'll say, peel the onion back and aggregate that data a bit better, just with those search queries and terms. And that's why I mentioned before that, I believe that this particular application can help us get to where the council is questioned about those types of calls and what that information is just through this search application, and then that may better inform us of what some of our next steps may be as it relates to what programs we choose to either participate in or stand up to address that particular community health concern here in the city.
Thank you, Chief. So if this, if you believe that this is in fact robust enough to add that capability, you're super familiar with the comments from the public over the last few years and the things that the council is interested in helping to measure moving forward. I would just hope that we would set up those measurements in a way that is informed by the public comment and the interests of this council, the direction of this council over the last couple of years, and then begin to have data that is shareable so that we can share that story. One of my questions for you tonight was going to be on your confidence in that. I think we've all experienced in the professional world bringing on a new software package because it does one thing really well. This isn't the thing that we're being sold with this particular package, so it's an extra. And so if you're confident in it and it will meet that need moving forward, then I look forward to being able to see that data and being able to report back that story to our community that's been asking for it. Thanks.
What I'll say is I'm confident in that it will give us a much clearer picture. And again, I think it will help define where it is we should go. I understand what the desire is. I'm not sold on the fact that we need to spend $35,000 on a consultant to come and look at a bunch of data, because part of the issue is how are we going to get that data to them, and then how are they going to actually aggregate it and give us, I'll say, an outcome. This here, at least, once we run the strings and the queries, at that point we'll have the raw data, and then at that point we'll know, okay, based on what we have, this is the most logical next step. So I think this here allows us to make a much more informed decision as to what the next step, should be.
Thank you. With respect to $35,000, that's a different conversation, but since you are expressing your confidence in the data, Data's ability to meet that concern. If it turns out not to, come and tell us.
Right, and it could be just the opposite, because as we all know, as they say, I don't say garbage, but good in, good out. If the data is not good, then it's not going to show, it's not going to show us that, or it'll show us that the data we have is not good. But in either case, it's going to show us and identify for us what those next steps are, either for me and my staff internally as it relates to our, accurate collection or documentation of circumstances and data, or it will show here's what what the data is and here's what the logical next step is.
Thanks so much.
Councilmember Fields?
Thank you. So, did you ever think you were ruining the career of science fiction writers? And because all these things that we used to watch on, they're now happening, right?
Yes.
Which brings up a couple of points for me. One, you've heard a lot of questions about can this data be misused or used against residents or against the public's interests. And we certainly want to make sure that we're protecting the public from us. But I also see a real possibility and benefits around improved public safety, improved safety for the officers. There's a lot of things that you've described tonight that I could see potential by having information quicker, more rapidly. What would be really helpful, and I think our budget process will ask these things of everybody that's doing any kind of information technology projects, is you may not have to quantify everything in a financial terms on a cost-benefit analysis, but having a real clear picture of why this is going to improve our safety, improve even our efficiency you talked to earlier, improve our ability to research and do detective work. I mean, that's something I've talked about with you a number of times. Like, could we stop some of these crimes by having a better understanding of who's doing these crimes? So I see a lot of benefits, and I also want to express my appreciation that you brought this total technology sort of vision to us tonight, and that it will unfold in the budget process, other than your force metrics one. So I'm appreciative of that. With respect to the drones, I remember the initial conversations and the privacy concerns. But I think it's a ship that or I can't find a metaphor here, but it's going to happen. It's happening all across the world. Redmond's not going to build a bubble and say, hey, we're going to really limit the use of this technology. So what I ask is that as we move forward, that we continue to have very open conversations about first responder in particular. And I'm kind of excited at the fact that you could show up at my house in a minute and a half or 2 minutes and actually get a sense of what the danger is or what the concern is. So I think I'm excited and positive about everything that you've brought tonight. And I just wanted to express my appreciation, but also I think it's really important that we continue to be very open and transparent and have that dialogue. So thank you.
And with that, we will also develop a forward-facing or community-facing dashboard as it relates to the DFR, the drone first responder. So folks will see each and every call that we went on. They will be able to look at the flight trajectory and telemetry, understanding that is a concern. So folks will see that the drone departed, from the roof of City Hall. It went to, this particular location, and I'll, pick our big box stores to the east. So it went to, Target, Home Depot, Fred Meyer, whatever, that particular parking lot. Not to get super technical, but the actual camera in it faces the horizon. It does not drop down to provide the aerial overwatch until it actually arrives on scene. So there is no concern about it picking up things or people or stuff as it's on its way to its particular location. So I am very cognizant of that and sensitive to it, and we will make sure that it is completely transparent, like I said, by way of a public-facing dashboard that the community can look at, manipulate, and see all of the data and information for themselves.
Hey, one more, real quick.
Go ahead.
So back to that 30,000, I did remember a little bit about it, and I did have a chance to talk to former Councilmember Khan. And what I was reminded of is that the purpose for the outside consultant was to actually evaluate you all, like to evaluate, did we de-escalate properly? Did, what did the analysis tell us of how well we're doing with uniformed officers as far as going to incidents where maybe somebody else could be of assistance? So it was more about how it was a quality issue, and that's why it would have to be an independent study. That's so.
And for what it's worth, the governor's use of force database and task force is up and running, and our Washington State University has just sent out the invitations for agencies to participate. So we will be participating in that particular project and providing all of that data. So it will be done for us for free by the state based upon use of force and response and those types of things. And that goes back to the work I did on the Governor's Use of Force Task Force in 2022, I believe it was.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Just a friendly suggestion. How many drones did you say we have? Just one or? Seven? It might be fun to invite the public to name them. My vote would be for Droney McDrone.
Like Apple 64? Yes, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Are there any other questions or comments on this from other council members? Otherwise, I will give just a few of my wrap-up comments on this. And then we'll just touch base on the force metrics process going forward. But yeah, I would just note, to reiterate what I said earlier, I think, especially on the automated license plate readers, and I would say on school and on the speed zone cameras, as well as any, perhaps also with the drones as well. I think there's a conversation that council has indicated they're interested in that we should follow up on in terms of how data is used and making sure that we have really clear policies, and also just overall what is the, for example, on school zone or on the school cameras and also on the automated license plate readers. I'd love to see council, before we make that decision, be able to see exactly what the boundaries are going to be on all those things so that we could approve that, similar to some of the questions around, the flashing lights and when people will be ticketed, for example, on speed cameras, because I think that would help to give the rest of us the understanding as well as the transparency to the public of this was a process where we looked at this, we looked at the data, and we figured out what's reasonable. And then that would also give us the ability to go look at that policy again should we need to adjust it. So that would be my point. But I do really appreciate all the data and tracking, especially on the cameras, since this has been brought up multiple times. And I think being able to actually see what is happening in those zones is really helpful as we move into that conversation. On force metrics, from my perspective, I'm good to move forward. I'm glad that we can take some of that other money out, and I think maybe we want to have a different conversation about what it'll take to actually get towards the vision of what that 35,000 was originally allocated for, as Councilmember Fields brought up, and we can put that on a different agenda, but take that part out. I will ask the council, given the further discussion on this item, is everyone good putting that item on a future consent agenda as soon as we can get that on there? Any objections? Councilmember Fields?
I'm okay with it being on consent. I would like, I don't know if it's just a request or a condition. I'll have to think about it. But as Chief Lowe said, that we have an opportunity to get a 2-year contract. I would like, certainly would like to have council discussion in 2 years before we, exercise that option. So,
Thank you. Chief Lowe, would you have to come back to us to renew that contract anyway, if we did just do a 2-year contract?
Yeah, I would say it depends on how it's written. If it, the way it was restructured was, instead of it being a 5-year contract, it would be the 2 years with the renewal for the subsequent 3 years, unless either party did it within whatever the specified days. I don't recall off the top of my head the number of days, but I'm glad to go back and see what I can work out.
Mayor Bernie?
I appreciate Councilmember Fields' concern or question. I think there's a way to do the renewal and also to have regular reports back to council on how it's going, so that you're more updated in what it looks like, so that when, prior to the next renewal coming up, you're fully informed on if there's any issues. But I don't know what the time frame is, so I don't want to commit to like a yearly or whatever, but I'll talk with the chief and we'll come back with you on that.
great. Thank you.
Does that sound good? Okay, great.
What I anticipate with this particular technology for the quarterly updates that we do, we will use the force metrics to generate that data. So you will see it on a very routine and frequent basis. And then if there's something specific that you guys would like by way of, say, an annual report out on it, then we can incorporate that into, that annual presentation.
Great. Well, we will look forward to seeing that, assuming that we adopt it. Council Vice President Forsyth, last quick word on this.
I'm just interested, you were asking for this to be on consent, but I'm unclear of if that's the 2-year contract or the 5-year contract, and I'd like to see the updated memo with the updated funding outlined as well. So I'm not sure I'm ready for it to be on consent without seeing those couple of things.
Mayor Bernie?
How about, in this negotiation, we bring it back to committee of the whole with that information, so that council will feel more informed for it to be on consent.
Yep.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Well, I think if there are no other council questions, then we will close out this item and say thank you very much to our police chief and deputy chief for all of this great presentation and work on this. The next item, sorry, pull up my notes here. The next item on the agenda is the Redmond 2050 Planning Commission recommendations for overlay green buildings, Redmond zoning code rewrite, human services and annexation and regional planning. Thank you to our planning team for staying late to have this discussion with us. Carol Helen, Director of Planning and Community Development, will introduce this item.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President Kritzer. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight, as part of Redmond 2050 work, we're continuing council's discussion on Planning Commission recommendations for overlake and related Redmond zoning code rewrite elements, including green building and program updates. An updated issues matrix was provided in your packet, and tonight staff's prepared to go into additional details if council has questions or needs them. If time allows, if time allows, we'll also discuss any questions you might have about the Planning Commission recommendations for the Human Services and Annexation chapters. And we provided responses to the questions from last week's staff report also in your packet. We don't have any additional study sessions scheduled after tonight on the topics that I just listed. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce the lead staff for these elements, Becky Fry, Jenny Liebeck, and Kim Dietz. Online. So I'm going to turn that over to Becky.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. So for this evening, we have provided an extensive issues matrix responses to all of your existing questions. Based on the time, we wanted to ask you if you wanted us to go through the issues matrix items, or if it's just a matter of you find that the information is sufficient and you want to dive into specific particular topics.
I think it would make sense for us to dive in if council members feel that an issues matrix item didn't answer their question or they wanted to have further public discussion, since there's quite a bit in the issues matrix for all of these items.
There is. For the sake of staff, it would be really helpful if you have specific comments on code-related pieces. None of the topics in the issues matrix really are impacting a lot of the actual comprehensive plan policies at this point, but there were some questions maybe related to deep diving into the code and specific the incentive program. So we're prepared to do that tonight, but also we could do one-on-one conversations if somebody wanted to deep dive even more extensively into the numbers in particular.
I will also note that while this is the last scheduled study session on this item, and we decided to put together two different items, assuming we might have enough time, should we not have enough time, I could look to schedule a little bit more time for this discussion. So just wanted to put that out there as well. But I will open it up. So let's start. I think we're starting. Actually, we'll have all the pieces out there, but I think especially on overlay green buildings and the Redmond zoning code rewrite. Are there any questions or comments? I see Council Vice President Forsyth will kick us off.
Yes, happy to kick us off. My question pertains to matrix item number 9 on the overlay incentive program and the, in particular, green building and the green rooftop incentives. So this is something our council has talked about for many years as far as incentivizing lowering the reduction of the heat dome effect, and one way to do that being green roofs. So the response that we got has me a bit concerned, because it's basically saying that this needs to go back to the Planning Commission for review, and that won't be happening until the fall. So I'm just wondering where the disconnect kind of happened, that this has been something that I know I've been talking about in my time on council, and I know other council members have as well. So if you can just provide me with some clarity on that.
This is Jenny, and Kim may want to weigh in on this as well. But really, there's new building code language or energy code language that has recently come out, as well as some additional adopted plans at the city. And so we just want to be sure that we're not creating any conflict or tension between any of those priorities and goals. So we just needed additional time for staff to be able to vet all of those pieces, and again, ensure that we had consistency and no conflicts with the language that was proposed.
Okay, so you're just further clarity. Was this not something that was brought up to the Planning Commission before for them to study?
I think I can clarify that. So one of the things that we've done collectively, Jenny, Kim, and I have worked really closely together on all of this for quite a while, is the way that the programs are built are focused on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and not necessarily the specific options that people choose to use. So for instance, if you wanted to do mass timber, that could give you a lot of different outcomes, but for green roofs, that's another one too. It's a tool that you can use to achieve a number of different outcomes. And so all of the programs are built in such a way that if you choose to use a green roof or a landscaped wall or a bioengineered green wall, and you get the outcomes you need, you get the points based on the outcomes. What we're working on over the course of this summer is going into other sections of code and making sure that, for instance, the passive house, if there's a specific thing that a passive house construction needs that might impact our build-to or setback going into those areas or affecting the building height or anything, that we're going to scrub the codes so that those tools don't get caught up in some minutia of the code. So that's what we're working on over the course of the summer. The actual passive house, green roof, green wall, all of those things are actually built in and allowed and incentivized through the program based on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. But the actual nitty-gritty of making sure that all of those little pieces and parts aren't getting caught up on other sections of code, that's the work that we're still working on.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
That was a really helpful explanation. Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Thanks so much. So I have a follow-up question on number 14 in our matrix. Is that part of the code questions that you'd prefer us to not ask tonight? I just want to clarify that.
We can answer the question to the best of our abilities. The staff person who is the expert on that is on vacation, so we might have to come back in the future. And
So on that specific anyway, I'll follow up. Okay, thanks, Becky. Appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions from the council on this first set of matrix items? Comments? All right. So I think we can move on to the human services and annexation pieces.
Great, thank you.
Right, so I will be representing for Ian and Jeff for the human services element tonight, and then Audra Cardenas is on online as well to talk about annexation. So similar to the conversation we just had, there was an issue matrix that was included in your packet. I also followed up with some of the council members to see if there were particular discussion topics that they felt needed to be addressed or presented tonight, and received the affirmation that the issue matrix resolved those questions generally. So if there is anything additional from the issue matrix that you would like to discuss, we can do that tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do council members have any topics that you'd like to have discussion on or questions following up on some of the answers provided in the matrix? While council members are doing their thoughts, I'll throw one out there. So I guess one question that I had on the annexation piece is in our vision, we say that our goal would be that all areas essentially that could be annexed will be annexed by 2050. And I just thought it would be helpful to have a little bit of a discussion on why we think it's best and how we measure the benefits to our city to annexing all of those areas.
Audra, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So yes, our goal is to annex all these areas, but this is a process that is resident-led. So we cannot really tell the residents, now do you want to annex? It's a process that they start. So it is kind of difficult to say, okay, we are basically waiting for them to bring a notice of intent to annex. So the benefits, we are basically complying with the Growth Management Act. That's a big thing, because we want to have all the preserve the urban growth area and have all the areas that are unincorporated King County brought into the urban area, and so King County doesn't have to provide services to those little islands that are still in the UGA. So that's basically one of the benefits to the city.
And is there a financial benefit relative to today for us annexing as well? I mean, I hear you that essentially it's complying with the Growth Management Act is the biggest reason, but I'm just curious how we think about that.
There is, well, every time there is a notice of intent to annex, there is a financial analysis done. It was done, if you remember, we are having the public hearing for the 97th potential annexation area next week. So we did a little bit of analysis on what is the benefits and the cost. For example, some of the services we already provide to those areas, so those wouldn't change, right? But a financial incentive from King County or Washington State, there is none at this point.
Great, thank you very much. Are there other questions, comments from the council? I'm not seeing any. Councilmember Stewart?
I'll just echo the comment. I think it was from Ian Lefcourt last week that the work on this particular body of work, it really seems to bring into the documents what we kind of already feel and practice here in the city of Redmond. And I thank all of you for getting us to this point, and congratulations on this next body of work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So not seeing any other ones. I will add one other comment just on one of the matrix items related to my comments around adding some more specificity on food security, mental health, childcare. I'm not sure if the suggestion is exactly what I was getting at, but I'm happy to follow up with staff with a few more suggestions before we see that coming back. My thought was just to be a little clearer in terms of our vision of saying, you know, by 2050, we want to be a place where no one goes hungry, where people have access to affordable childcare, you know, and I think even within some of the pieces, not just in the vision, but within a few of the policies to be specific. And for example, HS 20, which talks about supporting active spaces and resources for kids and teenagers. That'd be a great one to say, active spaces and adequate mental health resources for teenagers, something like that, just to be a little clearer on our vision in a few of these spaces. So I'll share a few ideas and get that back, and hopefully when we see it again, we can consider those.
I think, yeah, I would be happy to follow up with you to make sure that the language is specifically meeting what you need. So maybe we can follow up one-on-one, because the next time this does come back will be as a part of the larger package. So want to make sure that you all feel good with the language.
Great, and yeah, it would be smaller tweaks, so.
Okay.
Any other comments on this? Okay, with that, we'll say thank you, and can you remind us, Director Helland, when what we'll see next on 2050? Or you can send us a message on that, but that we'll see it again soon, I'm sure.
Okay, so tomorrow night at Planning Commission, we're having a couple more public hearings. And so some of the topics that are moving forward include some super regulation updates where we're adopting the infill exemptions. We have our land use chapter, our community development and design chapter with our more inclusive design conversations moving forward. And that will come to council, I believe, in May or June. And then we have our omnibus package, which is all the cleanups and just bringing it all into one package, all the little final tweaks. So that's all that's left, though. We're getting near the end.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for your hard work on all this. I agree with Councilmember Stewart's comments that it's really great to see all the input that we've provided reflected in these elements. Thank you. That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is council talk time, and we have 3 minutes left. Should we wrap it up in 3 minutes, or would someone like to make a motion to extend by 5 minutes so we don't feel too pressured? All right, 3 minutes, let's do it. I'll just note a few things. Just wanted to note that we did have subcommittee conversations with the mayor and COO, so council members should look out for emails as those subcommittees will be convened and connected to staff in the upcoming week. Also send out a message to council members offering that, or Deidre sent a message offering to set up tours of other Plymouth housing projects. Would you like to check those out? So follow up with Deidre. Just a reminder, the 5th Tuesday of this month, we'll be having our follow-up retreat with Anita Page on our respect, equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism work. And I think those are my key updates for today. I saw that Councilmember Salahuddin sent out some notes from NLC, which we were going to do in council talk time. But perhaps we can get that update during committee reports and business meeting next week or following council talk time. But I will open it up last 2 minutes. Any items for council talk time? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Last week, Director Burt emailed out to the council the first quarter CIP update, and it integrates our feedback from the year-end report regarding just how that report, basically the red light, green light, yellow light came back. So if you did not see it, do check that out because it integrated our feedback. And if you have continued feedback, I would just encourage you to be in touch with him. Thanks.
Mayor Bernie.
Just to remind the council, take a look at your council calendar the last month of April. There's some holds on your calendar for light rail and things like that. So between that and then the senior and community center opening, please check your calendar.
Yeah, I will reiterate on that one because there is an opportunity to do a pre-opening ride on the light rail potentially, as well as the actual opening. And then there's a couple of pre-activities for senior and community center that we got invited to as well. So yeah, take a look at those in RSVP. And if there is no objection, no other comments, this meeting is adjourned.